Chapter 843. Song Lianqing and Chai Junlang looked at each other, then rushed to catch up. Wan Ling's flying speed was not fast, and her pink dress swayed in the air, instantly attracting attention. One on the left and one on the right, the two of them chased after her. Before they could say anything, Wan Ling frowned and landed on the roof of an abandoned building. She stared at the two and shouted, "Why are you two following me?" Chai Junlang answered first, "I heard that you were busy here, so I came to see if you needed any help." Song Lianqing nodded and said, "Me too." Wan Ling raised her chin slightly arrogantly and said coldly, "I don't need your help and I don't need your help either. Don't follow me anymore or don't blame me for being rude." The two's flattery was immediately stuck in their throats. They looked at each other and a trace of anger flashed across their eyes. They had the same thought in their minds at the same time. "Stinking bitch, don't be so arrogant. When I get my hands on you, you'll see." Song Lianqing's gaze inadvertently swept past Wan Ling's ample bosom, and he looked around with a face full of smiles. "Wan Ling, where are you going in this barren mountain? Do I need to report to you where I'm going?" After Wan Ling threw out that sentence, she quickly flew away at a much faster speed than before, as if she wanted to shake off the two. "Stinking bitch." Song Lianqing looked at Wan Ling's graceful figure and scolded in a low voice. Chai Junlang chuckled and said, "I don't care if she stinks, this woman still has some good stuff on her body. If you're too bored to stink, let me." Their voices stopped abruptly, and the two realized that Wan Ling had not flown far away, but had landed somewhere in front of the plaza. The two looked at each other, then quickly flew into the air, and watched as Wan Ling's swaying figure entered a shop. Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting calmly in the empty shop, was patiently waiting with his eyes closed. Light footsteps came from outside, and when he opened his eyes he was startled. He saw that Wan Ling, who had fainted due to her anger, was no longer the same as before. Instead, she had changed into a delightful pink dress, revealing a pair of good breasts that could move a man's heart. It seemed that she had specially dressed up. Yu Qianqiu slowly stood up, his eyes slightly narrowed, and he raised his guard. He was worried that Wan Ling was here for revenge. Wan Ling leisurely walked toward him. She only stopped when she was only one person away from him. She bit her lips and stared at Yu Qianqiu with a complicated gaze. This caused Yu Qianqiu to become even more cautious. As a result, the two of them silently stared at each other for a long time. One of them had ulterior motives while the other was cautious. Song Lianqing and Chai Junlang, who were in the air, subconsciously lowered their altitude to listen. What puzzled them was that there was no sound from the shop that Wan Ling had entered. Seeing that they had already descended to the rooftop of a row of shops, the two looked at each other, and decided to directly land on the street, and looked into the shop opposite them. They saw Wan Ling's graceful figure standing silently, and it was obvious that it was a man who was half a head taller than Wan Ling, and they couldn't see the man's full face. The man and woman just stood there silently, staring at each other. This situation made Song Lianqing and Chai Junlang a little speechless. No wonder this woman didn't like anyone and didn't allow them to follow her. It seemed like she already had someone in her heart and was secretly dating her lover. The two looked at each other and saw the faint anger in each other's eyes. This woman had a man but didn't say anything, causing all the men in the immortal world to flock to her like ducks. He was clearly playing with them. Yu Qianqiu's vigilant gaze moved slightly, and he noticed that two people had landed on the street outside. His head moved slightly to the right and avoided Wan Ling's obstructed vision, and saw the two people on the street outside clearly. Song Lianqing, who was dressed in blue, caused his pupils to shrink slightly. He immediately recognized that the other person was wearing the uniform of Heartless Palace, but he didn't recognize the other person. Faster thief. This woman actually brought help. Anger appeared on Yu Qianqiu's face, and the purple fire element stored in his body began to stir. Wan Ling, who had been biting her lips, saw the reflection of Song Lianqing and Chai Junlang in Yu Qianqiu's eyes. Her eyes flickered slightly and instantly her beautiful eyes became watery. She let go of her red lips and said with a slightly sobbing tone, "I brought the money." Yu Qianqiu was stunned and his gaze returned to Wan Ling's face. After seeing the tears in her eyes, he was momentarily at a loss. He didn't know why she was crying, but it seemed that women were women after all and couldn't take being bullied. He couldn't help but cough and said, "It's good that you brought it, give it to me." He very consciously stretched out his hand. Wan Ling's eyes were filled with hot tears, and she pulled the 2 storage bracelets from her wrist. Her shoulders trembled and she sobbed and said, "Can you guarantee that after you take the spirit stones, you won't pester me anymore?" Faster thief. Why do you make it sound like I'm a gangster who lives off a woman? Yu Qianzhou blanked for a second, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Don't worry, as long as I get the right amount of spirit stones, we won't have anything to do with each other anymore. As long as you don't find trouble with me, I won't find trouble with you either. Outside, Song Lianqing and Chai Junlang exchanged a look. The conversation between the two inside couldn't be more obvious. It seemed like Wan Ling had run into a love swindler and was being blackmailed by that swindler. Song Lianqing and Chai Junlang originally wanted to be the hero and save the damsel in distress, but remembering that the swindler dared to deceive Wan Bushing's granddaughter, they were afraid that this swindler was not a simple person. Hence they decided to wait and see. I hope you remember what you said today, otherwise I won't let you off even if I become a ghost. Wan Ling wiped the tears off her face with a wave of her sleeve, and slapped the 2 storage bracelets on her wrist onto Yu Qianzhou's outstretched palm. Choking with sobs, she said, "Remember, don't pester me anymore." Yu Qianzhou was rendered speechless. He quickly sent his divine sense into the 2 storage bracelets. 50 billion divine-grade spirit stones was not a small amount, and it took him quite a bit of effort. After counting, he found that 50 billion divine-grade spirit stones, not one piece more, not one piece less, just right. With the spirit stones in his hands, a huge rock in his heart fell to the ground. Immediately, a smile spread across his face as he patted his chest and guaranteed, "From now on, you go your own way and I'll go mine. The disputes between us are written off. I hope you can do as you say, otherwise I won't let you off." Inside the shop, Wan Ling threw out those harsh words, then turned around and dashed out while wiping her tears. Ignoring the dumbfounded Song Lianqing and Chai Junlang, she sped away. Women, ah women. If you can't afford to play, then don't play. What's the point of crying and crying? It's as if I'm a gangster. Yu Qianzhou shook his head, sighing with emotion. He didn't expect his desperate gamble to actually succeed. 50 billion. He got it just like that. His gaze shifted to the 2 people staring at him from outside, and the complacent smile on his face immediately disappeared. He discovered that he couldn't see through their cultivation. Without a doubt, these 2 were immortal realm masters, especially those from the Heartless Palace. Yu Qianzhou's steps were steady as he made his way out of the shop. Now that he had gotten the money to register his business, this was not a good place to stay. Song Lianqing and Chai Junlang also couldn't see through Yu Qianzhou's cultivation, thus they dared not act rashly. When Yu Qianzhou reached the shop's entrance and was about to leave, Song Lianqing glanced at the mythical fire palace insignia on the shop, cupped his hands and smiled. "I'm Heartless Palace's disciple, Song Lianqing. Are you from the mythical fire palace?" Yu Qianzhou glanced at him indifferently, and just as he was about to leave with a few perfunctory words, he saw a slightly hunchbacked gray-robed old man walking along the desolate and messy street. After hearing Song Lianqing's words, he subconsciously stopped and looked left and right. Suddenly he chuckled, "Why does this sound so funny? He's Yu Qianzhou, a late-stage soul formation cultivator hired by the small Four Links Chamber of Commerce. He killed all the people from your Heartless Palace in the ruins of God. How did he become a disciple of the mythical fire palace?" The disciples of Heartless Palace are really getting worse with each generation. The hunchbacked old man shook his head and sighed with emotion as he walked away. The street suddenly became quiet and an evil wind blew from somewhere, bringing a chill to the entire street. Damn it. Where did this meddlesome old bastard come from? Yu Qianzhou looked at the receding figure and really wanted to go over and kick him. Song Lianqing's pupils suddenly shrank as he stared at Yu Qianzhou and said indifferently, "You're that Yu Qianzhou?" Although he and Chai Junlang had been staying near Myriad Saint Mountain for a long time, they were not cut off from the news. They had already heard the news that all the disciples of Heartless Palace had been annihilated in the ruins of God. It was said that all of them had died in the hands of a late-stage soul formation cultivator called Yu Qianzhou. He also heard that Wan Ling was holding hands with Yu Qianzhou in front of everyone. From this he thought of the scene of Wan Ling crying and leaving. Needless to say, this guy was definitely that Yu Qianzhou who was holding hands with Wan Ling in front of everyone. Otherwise, Wan Ling would definitely not show such a weak side. Yu Qianzhou had suspected that these 2 were helpers that Wan Ling had found. Now that he heard the other party's words, it was definitely not the case. Otherwise, it was impossible for them to not recognize him, and there was no need for them to do this. Yu Qianchou is me. Yu Qianchou said indifferently. Is there a problem? Chai Junlang gently opened the white jade folding fan in his hand and looked at Yu Qianchou. He shook his head and sighed. I thought Yu Qianchou was some amazing person. It's you. Sigh. I don't know what kind of drug Wanling ate. She actually fell into the hands of such a liar. It's really ridiculous. Song Lianqing revealed a sinister smile and said, You're really audacious to actually deceive Wan Bushing's granddaughter. Tell me honestly, how did you force her to submit? If there's a word of falsehood, I'll make you wish you were dead. Chai Junlang's eyes also lit up when he heard that. If he could get hold of the handle that forced Wanling to submit, then it would indeed be twice the result with half the effort. The two of you want to make a move on me here? Yu Qianchou looked around and said expressionlessly, If I remember correctly, Great Commander Wuxia has long stipulated that no one is allowed to make a move on this plaza at the entrance of the Divine Ruin Realm. Although the Divine Ruin Realm gathering is already over, I don't think the two of you have the guts to try it. Chapter 844. As soon as he said that, the two's faces froze and they couldn't help but look around. This place was already showing a bleak decline, and it would continue to be bleak until the Divine Ruin Realm opened again in the next 100 years. But even so, since Wuxia had already spoken, fighting was not allowed in this square outside the Divine Ruin Realm. Otherwise, it would be a challenge to Wuxia's authority. Although Wuxia had already left and no one knew if he would remember this matter, if someone spread this matter to Wuxia's ears, who knew what he would think? Song Lianqing and Chai Junlang naturally knew how powerful the Immortal Palace was. With their little guts, they didn't dare to challenge Wuxia's words, so they looked at each other blankly. There were fewer and fewer people leaving in the sky. Yu Qianchou looked up, then waved at the two with a mocking expression. I'm leaving first, no need to send me off. Stop. Song Lianqing shouted. The twisted expression on his face showed that he was enraged by the other party's words. He chuckled coldly and said, I advise you to honestly tell me how you forced Wanling to submit. Otherwise, unless you don't leave this place for the rest of your life once you step out of this square, you know what will happen to you. Know what? Yu Qianchou turned to look at the two and said expressionlessly, May I ask what your cultivation is like? Chai Junlang was taken aback for a moment. Then he waved his folding fan and clicked his tongue. Our cultivation bases are indeed not high. We're only at the late stage of minor immortal realm. However, you don't think it will be difficult for one of us to deal with you, a late-stage divine transformation bastard, right? The two couldn't help but laugh at the same time. Yu Qianchou turned a deaf ear to them and replied indifferently, I just want to warn the two of you, sometimes killing doesn't require a high cultivation. Don't force me to do it or you won't even have the chance to regret it. He had long wanted to test the power of the purple flames to see if killing immortals would feel good, but he didn't want to expose it so easily. In fact, he had been holding it in for a long time. Did I hear wrong? Chai Junlang asked Song Lianqing with a teasing expression. Is he threatening us? I think so. Song Lianqing nodded seriously. The two looked at each other and couldn't help but burst into laughter again. Yu Qianchou's brows twitched as he flew up and circled twice in the air. Looking around, he realized that there wasn't a single person in the messy square. He snorted coldly in his heart and flew away. How incorrigible. Do you really think you can escape? Chai Junlang, who was floating in the air, put away the fan in his hand. Together with Song Lianqing, he turned into two streams of light and gave chase. On top of a mountain not far away, a ripple-like light curtain appeared out of thin air and flickered. Then it instantly converged into a transparent crystal bead. 5 people suddenly appeared. Wan Lihong grabbed the hovering fantasy immortal bead and turned to Wan Ling, who was beside him. Are you sure neither of them noticed anything amiss? Wan Ling pondered for a moment before replying, probably not. She then turned to the hunchbacked old man behind her, cupping her hands in greeting. I'll leave this to Grand Elder. Once those two kill Yu Qianchou, Grand Elder will need to snatch that 50 billion divine great spirit stones back. The hunchbacked old man in Mu Wan's disguise nodded. Watching the 4 of them turn into streaks of light and chase after Huang Xiaolong, he too turned into a streak of light and flew in another direction. After flying out of the messy square, Yu Qianchou maintained his highest vigilance, pushing his cultivation to the limit as he sped toward the depths of the vast granite mountain range. Flying into a rocky valley, Huang Xiaolong landed at the center of the valley in a flicker. Your guts aren't small at all. Song Lianqing's cold harumph sounded in the air. Yu Qianzhou raised his head in apprehension. Even though he had a head start, the other party still caught up to him in the blink of an eye. An Immortal Realm Master was indeed an Immortal Realm Master, not someone a mere spirit-severing realm cultivator like him could compare to. Then I really want to see how big his guts are. I'll teach him a lesson first, lest a dead duck refuses to admit defeat. In the air, Cai Junlang folded the folding fan in his hand, shooting out in a streak of light. Almost at the same time he made his move, a white mist burst out from Yu Qianzhou's body. The streak of light pierced through the white mist and a loud bang resounded in the valley. Crushed rocks flew in all directions and the valley rumbled endlessly. The streak of light returned to the air, turning back into the folding fan in Cai Junlang's hand. The white mist dissipated, revealing a 10-meter deep pit in the valley below. However, Yu Qianzhou's figure was nowhere to be seen. Both of them blanked for a moment, then released their divine senses at the same time to scan the entire valley. Unfortunately, not a single person could be found. He escaped just like that. Impossible. With his cultivation base at the deity transformation final stage, there was no way he could escape right under his nose. The two of them looked at each other, then quickly separated to search every nook and cranny of the valley again. In the air, Wan Lihong and the others were also scanning the entire valley suspiciously under the effects of the illusionary immortal beads. They also couldn't see how Yu Qianzhou had disappeared. In short, after Cai Junlang attacked once, Yu Qianzhou disappeared for no reason. It was very strange. All of a sudden their pupils abruptly contracted. From the 10-meter deep pit in the valley, Yu Qianzhou silently rose from the stone pit and slowly floated into the air. Only after his entire body emerged from the pit did Song Lianqing and Cai Junlang, who were searching the valley, discover him. Both of them stared at him in shock with expressions of disbelief on their faces. Yu Qianzhou floated in the valley expressionlessly. The hem of his robes fluttered despite the lack of wind, and a violent killing intent surged out from his body. His eyes were half open as he swept his gaze over the two of them. He said indifferently, "You actually dared to attack me. Since you're seeking death, don't blame me for being impolite." The two of them were stunned. Song Lianqing then chuckled and said, "I've seen people who don't know life from death, but I've never seen someone who doesn't know life from death. Cai Junlang, keep an eye on him. This brat is a little strange. He can actually hide inside a stone. If we don't teach him a lesson, his foul mouth won't give in." As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his sleeve, and a ray of light shot out from his storage bracelet, slicing toward Yu Qianzhou's feet at an extremely fast speed. From the looks of it, he didn't want to kill Yu Qianzhou yet. Instead, he wanted to cripple Yu Qianzhou first. Yu Qianzhou's aura had already enveloped an area of several dozen meters. As soon as the ray of light penetrated his aura, his eyebrows twitched slightly. With a boom, the ray of light suddenly exploded into a large cloud of silver powder. This was an extremely bizarre scene. Song Lianqing and Cai Junlang's mouths instantly gaped open, and their eyes were filled with incredulity. The people in the air also looked at one another. Wan Lihong looked at Wan Ling with furrowed brows and transmitted her voice to her. "Ling, are you sure this Yu Qianzhou is only a soul formation final stage cultivator?" Wan Ling paused and looked at Yu Qianzhou in disbelief. "I shouldn't be wrong. I've checked it myself." "That's strange. The flying sword that Song Lianqing used is at least a level 3 immortal tool. Isn't it a little too terrifying to be able to shatter it into dust without a sound?" Song Lianqing muttered with a doubtful expression. Taking advantage of the moment when the two of them were dumbstruck, Yu Qianzhou's aura quickly spread out and locked onto the two of them. Sensing that they were being locked onto, the two of them abruptly came to their senses. They quickly exchanged a glance and disappeared at the same time. "Great star-sucking technique." A loud roar sounded from within the valley. Yu Qianzhou's eyes widened in anger. He spread his arms and his claws tore out 2 clouds of white mist. At the same time, his figure abruptly retreated and dodged. His claws were like 2 white ribbons as they retracted into his sleeves. In an instant, the 2 dried corpses that had been drained of water suddenly appeared. They collided with each other at the place where Yu Qianzhou dodged and fell to the ground at the same time. The 2 mummified corpses were struggling to get up from the ground. They looked extremely horrifying, but their movements seemed to be a little slow. The two corpses that got up together raised their heads and looked at each other. They seemed to be shocked by each other's appearance and waved their hands to attack each other at the same time. With a bang, the two of them were shaken by each other and took a few steps back. Suddenly, they looked at their outstretched hands at the same time and found that not only were they as thin as firewood, but they were also full of wrinkles. Then they reached out with both hands and touched their faces and bodies. A series of ho-ho sounds of horror came from their shriveled throats. They seemed to want to speak but couldn't make a sound normally. The two of them seemed to have scared themselves and retreated in disbelief. Xianxia looked at the two of them in surprise. He thought, it's really good to have an immortal body. My absorbing star's great technique actually can't kill them. The few people in the air took a deep breath. They were really scared by the strange scene below. Wanling couldn't help but cover her mouth with her hands, afraid that she couldn't help but make a sound. I want to see if you two dried corpses have the thick skin of an old monster. Xianxia's face was ferocious. He waved his sleeves and a 2-meter-long Xian saber appeared in his hand. He floated in the air and said indifferently, you two, if you have the ability, quickly run away. Otherwise, don't blame my saber for being merciless. The two dried corpses raised their horrifying heads. Their eyes that had shrunk deeply in their eye sockets revealed fear. Without saying a word, they flashed into the air and escaped together. Although they desperately urged their immortal power, the meridians in their body had shrunk a little too much. It was difficult to circulate their true essence like usual. Their flying speed was not much faster than the birds in the sky. Perhaps it was because their bodies were too thin. When they flew up, they immediately drilled out of the loose neckline. Their clothes and shoes all fell to the ground. They saw two disgusting dried corpses flying in the sky. It was really a strange thing in the immortal world. Chapter 845. The reason why Xianxia told them to run was to see how these two fellows would react after being hit by his absorbing star's great technique, so that he could accumulate some experience when he fought with others in the future. In the end, he discovered that even though the two of them wouldn't die, they had already lost the ability to fight. The corner of his mouth curved into a cold smile. With a few swings of the saber in his hand, he disappeared from the spot and reappeared directly above the two flying figures. The two of you, it was you who were heartless first. Don't blame me for being impolite. A voice came from above. Song Lianqing and Cai Junlang raised their heads and were instantly scared out of their wits. Without saying a word, Xianxia slashed his saber to the left and right. Two streaks of green light shot out and two heads flew into the air. The two dried corpses instantly lost their ability to fly, falling diagonally towards the granite mountain range below. The people in the sky were speechless when they saw this scene. At their level of cultivation, it was rare to see someone fight with their own hands. What they didn't know was that Xianxia liked the thrill of raising his saber. Some habits were hard to change. What made them the most speechless was the fact that the Heartless Palace's Grand Deacon's grandson and Carefree Palace's Sect Master's grandson were killed just like that. After this incident, the two families would definitely trace the matter back to Wangutong, because many people saw them coming with Wan Lihong. At that time, how would they explain themselves? They couldn't possibly tell the two families that it was Xianxia who killed the two of them. Wasn't it obvious that they were going against the Immortal Palace or the Immortal Emperor? If they had to offend one side, they would rather offend the two families than that terrifying Immortal Emperor. Ling, you've gone too far again. Wan Lihong sighed. Wan Ling was dumbfounded. Not to mention her, everyone thought that Song Lianqing and Cai Junlang might not be able to kill Xianxia, but no one thought that the two of them would die in Xianxia's hands. Two late-stage minor immortal cultivators couldn't even defeat a late-stage spirit-severing cultivator. A hunchbacked gray figure silently flashed to the back of a mountain peak and hid behind a huge rock, quietly watching Xianxia, who was floating in the air. When the people in the air saw this, their pupils shrank. Wan Ling transmitted her voice in shock. First Elder, what are you trying to do? Mu Wan's disguised hunchback elder replied in the direction of the voice transmission. Since those two fellows are useless, I'll do it myself. No. Wan Ling hurried to warn Huang Xiaolong through voice transmission. Once people find out that you killed an immortal emperor's secret agent, our Wan Gu Tong will be in big trouble. I don't think so. There shouldn't be anyone nearby. Even if I'm hiding someone, I'll disguise myself. No one will know who I am and Wan Gu Tong won't be implicated. As long as I kill that brat, I will immediately go out and spread the news, saying that I saw Yu Qianqiu fighting with Song Lianqing and Cai Junlang here, and in the end both sides were killed. I will make the scene more realistic. Mu Wan paused and said hesitantly, Miss, you can't be suspecting that I can't kill Yu Qianqiu, right? This person's skills are strange. First Elder shouldn't take the risk. Let's retreat. Wan Ling urged anxiously. Miss, don't worry, it's just a crooked magic art. It's fine against those two fools, but it won't work on me. Mu Wan's tone was confident, but he tactfully rejected. Yu Qianqiu stopped in the air and looked around. He slowly put away the blue flame broadsword. His intuition told him that there was danger approaching him, but there was nothing around him. After a moment's vigilance, he didn't discover anything. In a flash, he chased after the two headless corpses and pulled out the storage bracelets from their wrists. Just as he was about to remove the second storage bracelet, he felt a strong sense of danger approaching him. It was the kind of danger that could take his life in an instant. In the blink of an eye, a ray of golden light flashed and quickly enveloped him. Yu Qianqiu did not hesitate to take out the golden umbrella. Ever since he started practicing the animal fencing technique, he had a deep trust in this kind of instinct, and he had never made a mistake before. Bang! There was a loud sound like a thunderclap from a clear sky. The strong wind was as fierce as a steel knife, sweeping across the ground. In that instant, the golden umbrella exploded with a strong golden light, instantly canceling out the sneak attack of the teleportation. At the same time, the power of the attack was reflected back. The sneak attacker's figure was quickly bounced back, and the hunchbacked Mu Wan appeared several dozen meters away. It's you. Yu Qianqiu, who was safe and sound inside the golden umbrella, exclaimed. He immediately recognized that it was the hunchbacked old man who exposed his identity at the entrance of the mythical Fire Palace shop. At this moment, Yu Qianqiu was so scared that his face was pale and his heart was pounding. He was secretly thanking the heavens and the earth for Bai Changchun. If he hadn't practiced the animal fencing technique that Bai Changchun had taught him, he wouldn't have been able to defend against such an expert sneak attack even if he had the golden bead to teleport. Judging from the power of this palm, it could probably smash him into pieces. He suddenly remembered that when Bai Changchun had taught him the animal fencing technique on Obedient Island, he had secretly laughed that it was an animal world and didn't think much of it. Now that he thought about it, he remembered that Bai Changchun seemed to have said that as long as he mastered it, he would be able to benefit from it for the rest of his life. Seemed that he was right. Ooh, old man. I love you to death. Yu Qianqiu hid under the golden umbrella. His legs were slightly weak. He now deeply understood the power of the animal fencing technique. To be honest, he had always been slightly resentful because Bai Changchun didn't teach him any powerful spells or magic treasures. He felt that their master-disciple relationship was somewhat nominal. Only now did he realize that the animal fencing technique that Bai Changchun had taught him was thousands of times more powerful than any spells or magic treasures. This thing was something that could save one's life at a critical moment. What spells or magic treasures could be more important than protecting one's own life? Golden umbrella. Mu Wan, who was sent flying, also exclaimed. Wan Ling and the others in the air also almost cried out in shock. They all knew very well what the golden umbrella was. If the golden thread robe was something that everyone in the Immortal Palace had, then not everyone could have the golden umbrella. Only the 24 protectors of the Immortal Palace had it. These 24 people were the people around Immortal Emperor Jin Tai, and their cultivation was at least at the early Immortal Emperor stage. It was said that the golden umbrella was personally made by Immortal Emperor Jin Tai and was a top-grade defensive celestial treasure. Its defensive power was very strong. No one thought that Yu Qianqiu would have the golden umbrella personally made by Immortal Emperor Jin Tai. No one was shocked by the power of the golden umbrella, but it proved that Yu Qianqiu's previous words were not false. He was indeed Immortal Emperor Jin Tai's trusted secret agent. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to obtain a treasure personally made by Immortal Emperor Jin Tai. Old thing. Who are you? You dare to sneak attack me? You must be tired of living. Yu Qianqiu shouted angrily. The light from the golden umbrella wrapped around him and shot towards Mu Wan. He pushed his palms out and shouted, absorbing star great technique. Once this terrifying name was shouted, the people in the air immediately felt their hearts rise to their throats. They didn't know what kind of evil technique this was to be able to squeeze someone dry. Mu Wan also came back to his senses and sneered, It's just a small trick. There's no need to embarrass yourself in front of this old man. After sensing Yu Qianchou's qi activity locking onto him, his own qi activity quickly burst forth, directly blocking Yu Qianchou's qi activity outside. He did not move, just stood there and let Yu Qianchou slowly absorb it. Huh. Yu Qianchou was surprised. He immediately found that his qi was blocked by the opponent's qi. He quickly stopped and didn't dare to jump forward. Instead, he used teleportation and circled around Mu Wan several times, looking for a loophole to attack. He kept shouting, "Suck, suck, suck, I suck." Unfortunately, the opponent's qi was impenetrable. It was as if he was wrapped in an invisible shield. He sucked for a long time but still couldn't suck out a fart. Mu Wan had used teleportation consecutively and used up a lot of his true essence. He knew that he didn't have a chance to succeed, so he quickly retreated and looked at the hunchbacked old man in front of him in shock. Ever since he cultivated the absorbing star great technique, although he had only used it a few times, he never missed. Even Yan Zhuixing, who cultivated demonic arts, had suffered a great loss at his hands. However, he met his nemesis today. The absorbing star great technique was useless against this old thing. "Kid, you didn't expect this, did you?" Mu Wan snorted and said, "I saw the weakness of your evil technique at a glance. As long as one's cultivation has reached the great immortal realm, their qi has been cultivated to the point that it's almost solid, and they can kill people invisibly. As long as they cover their entire body with qi to protect themselves, this evil technique of yours won't have any effect." He didn't explain this to Yu Qianchou but to the people in the air. Sure enough, Wan Lihong and the others were enlightened. So that's how it was. Wan Ling looked around and frowned. She transmitted her voice to Mu Wan, "Grand Elder, don't waste any more time with him. He has the golden light umbrella to protect himself, and we don't have any powerful immortal treasures with us. We can't do anything to him. If we delay any longer, it'll be disadvantageous to my Wan Gutong. Please leave quickly." Mu Wan paused. He was unwilling to give up. He transmitted back, "Miss, with this brat's cultivation he can't use the golden light umbrella to its full potential. I'll try a few more times. I have a high chance of breaking it." "Grand Elder, the golden light umbrella is an immortal treasure personally refined by Immortal Emperor Jin Tai. Even if you can break it, have you thought about the consequences?" Wan Ling warned him word by word. "That will definitely alert Immortal Emperor Jin Tai. Previously we saw that he was only a spirit-severing cultivator, so we thought he was only a spy sent by the Immortal Emperor. That's why we dared to attack him. Now that we've confirmed that he's the Immortal Emperor's trusted aide, think about the consequences of killing the Immortal Emperor's trusted aide? I'm afraid that the Immortal Emperor would rather kill the wrong person than let the wrong person go. As long as it's someone related to Yu Qianchou, they will all be implicated. Our Wangutong will not be an exception." Mu Wan's heart skipped a beat, but he knew Wan Ling was right. He looked at Yu Qianchou with reluctance. Yu Qianchou was also staring at him coldly. With a wave of his sleeve, a purple flying sword floated in front of him. Yu Qianchou sneered, "I didn't expect you to be able to break my absorbing star's great art. Good. Then try my flying sword. Let's see if you have the ability to break it." Chapter 846. He knew very well that he was safe inside the golden light umbrella, but the difference in their cultivation levels was too great. Based on Mu Wan's speed, there was no way he could hurt him. Thus he purposely taunted Mu Wan, hoping that Mu Wan would be foolish enough to break through his purple flame flying sword. Then he would take the opportunity to kill Mu Wan. However, to his surprise, Mu Wan only left a cold humph, then turned into a streak of light and disappeared into the distance. Mu Wan didn't even give him a chance to use the purple flame flying sword. She accepted Wan Ling's warning, not daring to act rashly. In the air, Wan Lihong and the others nodded at each other, then quietly chased after Mu Wan. Before she left, Wan Ling looked at Yu Qianchou with a complicated expression. Thinking about how Mu Wan had touched and pinched her face, and how she couldn't do anything to him, her heart twisted uncomfortably. She could only hope that they would never meet again, lest she remembered that disgusting scene every time she saw him. Yu Qianchou watched as the streak of light disappeared into the distance, his brows knitted together. He was a little confused by Mu Wan's actions. Ambushing him out of the blue, then running away without saying a word. What was the meaning of this? Mu Wan's cultivation level far surpassed his own. Could it be that Mu Wan noticed that his purple flame flying sword was condensed from the purple flame and ran away in fear? Thinking about it, it didn't seem possible. According to his knowledge, even in the immortal world, there weren't many people who had the fortune to see the purple flame flying sword. It was even more impossible for Mu Wan to recognize the purple flame flying sword. This was the first time he had seen something like this, let alone others. No matter how he thought about it, he felt that the problem was with the golden light umbrella. Mu Wan was probably scared away by the treasure from the immortal palace. Thinking of this, he began to worry. If Mu Wan leaked the secret of his golden light umbrella, then it would be troublesome. Who cares if it really happened? This old man will not admit it even if he was beaten to death, and will instead accuse Mu Wan of framing me. Yu Qianqiu steeled his heart. He couldn't be bothered to think about it anymore. What he didn't know was that he was thinking too much. Mu Wan and Wan Tong's higher-ups would not spread this news, for they had their own concerns. Just think about it. They had already confirmed that Yu Qianqiu was Immortal Emperor Jin Tai's trusted aide. If they leaked the news that Yu Qianqiu had the golden light umbrella, Yu Qianqiu would definitely suspect that Wan Gutong was behind this sneak attack. Ambushing an Immortal Emperor's trusted aide was not something Wan Gutong could afford to offend. Needless to say, Wan Gutong's secret would rot in his stomach. He cautiously looked around several times, not daring to put away the golden light umbrella that he had taken out, fearing that he would encounter another sneak attack out of the blue. After some hesitation, he identified a direction and lightly stomped his feet. The granite on the ground melted and he sank into the ground along with the umbrella. He sank. Good. After Wan Tong had to that he had won the earth, he. Close to 2 hours later, he found himself out of the granite mountain range. Layers of soil appeared around him and he quickly floated to the surface. When he emerged from the surface, he found himself in a barren land overgrown with weeds. Behind him was the granite mountain range. The barren land stretched as far as the eye could see. Among the lush grass, there were a few tall trees standing proudly. After Yu Qianqiu identified the direction, he didn't hesitate and sped away. On the green and yellow plains, tigers and wolves could be seen chasing their prey. The bloody scene did not attract Yu Qianqiu's attention. His eyes were filled with determination as he flew towards the horizon. Only when he noticed some special terrain would he throw a small silver ball into the air. The purpose of this trip was simple. He wanted to go to the hallucinatory immortal city and register a merchant association. He wanted the merchant association to flourish in the immortal world. He wanted to lead the cultivators in the immortal world to search for the miracle of life. Then the miracle would begin with him. After flying at high speed for more than 10 days, Yu Qianqiu was in tears. Based on his current flying speed, if he was in the immortal world, he would have circled countless times. But in the immortal world, he had just flown out of this vast plane. How big the immortal world was became a question in his mind. It was another sunset. The sunset dyed Yu Qianqiu, who was flying at high speed in the sky, red. Even though he felt that his cultivation was not bad, he still felt that flying at high speed for more than a dozen days was a little too much for him. He grabbed a handful of elixirs and stuffed them into his mouth. As he flew, he slowly recovered his true essence. He felt that the effect was too slow and was considering when to get some elixirs. Suddenly, he was attracted by the landscape below. Although it was still relatively bright high up in the sky, the ground below was gradually shrouded in darkness. In the dusky twilight, there was a scarlet mountain hilly area. There were few trees and bright red stone mountains everywhere. Yu Qianqiu, who was more or less tired, could not help but jump down. Taking the opportunity to admire the strange mountain scenery, he took a break and recovered his spirit. So he landed on a red stone pillar that was like a towering stalagmite. He looked around and found that the reason why the mountain was red was because of the Daoist landscape. The mountain was undulating and dangerous, and the stone forest was like a mess. Under the sunset, there was a gray fog that rippled, giving people a feeling of palpitation. The undulating and messy stone forest seemed to hide some terrifying monster. Although the gray fog was thin, it seemed to be able to block people's vision. It seemed that no matter how high one's cultivation was, it would be difficult to peep at the secrets hidden behind it. The surroundings were dead silent. Yu Qianqiu felt that it was a little strange. Curious, he immediately flew into the depths of the gray stone forest. Along the way, he did not find anything unusual. In the depths of the messy stone forest, arched hills gradually appeared. The hills were full of caves of various sizes, and it was unknown how they were formed. Yu Qianqiu circled a few times in the gray fog and landed in front of a tall scarlet hill. Directly in front of him was a cave with a diameter of 5 or 6 meters. It was pitch black inside and a faint gray fog was curling out from the inside. It looked very strange. After hesitating for a while at the cave entrance, he felt that the immortal world could not be judged by the common sense of the human world, so he did not dare to enter. He stretched out 2 fingers and a dazzling red spark jumped and condensed at the tip of his finger. It became the size of an egg. He condensed all the ordinary fire in his body into this ball, and with a flick of his finger, it shot directly into the depths of the cave with a whoosh. Only to hear a muffled hum sound from inside the cave, and the entire belly of the mountain seemed to be ignited by the raging fire. The big and small caves on the hill instantly shone with red light, and one after another flames sprayed out. It was like thousands of fireworks had bloomed together. There was no doubt that the big and small caves on the hill were all connected. The cave entrance that Yu Qianqiu was facing was the place where the fire was the fiercest. The surging flames swallowed his body in an instant. But he did not avoid it and stood quietly at the cave entrance, letting the fire engulf him. To him, he could not think of any fire in the world that could hurt him. Almost at this moment, from the seemingly empty hill came a series of shrill and angry squeaks. It was so sharp that it pierced one's eardrums, followed by the sound of countless flapping wings. Yu Qianqiu's pupils shrank slightly and saw that in the raging sea of fire, there were dense black shadows that quickly escaped from the cave entrance like lightning. The squeaks immediately filled the air. After the raging fire rose for a while, it gradually disappeared and shrunk in the cave. Amidst the noise, Yu Qianqiu stared dumbfoundedly at the creatures that filled the sky. He never thought that the fire that he had set up on a whim would actually attract so many creatures. Bats. Each and every one of them was as big as a wash basin, and their bodies were covered in fur. What made Yu Qianqiu feel strange was that the fire that he had released actually did not harm the fur on their bodies. He suddenly recalled a type of bat recorded in the Illustrated Jade Archive. It was called the enchanting vampire bat, and it lived by sucking the blood of living creatures. Although they were only as big as a wash basin, they could suck the blood of a live cow dry in one breath, and swell to the point where they would not die. The fur on their bodies was not afraid of fire, and the treasures refined from them were the nemesis of cultivators who played with fire. Their bones were born with the ability to control the wind, and were excellent materials for refining flying artifacts. Compared to ordinary flying artifacts, their speed could be increased by about a third. The most valuable part of the enchanting vampire bat was its pair of eyes. Its eyes were born with the ability to confuse a person's mind. After bewitching an animal's mind, the enchanting vampire bat could effortlessly attach itself to the animal's body and suck its blood dry without any resistance. Harvesting its eyeballs could be used to refine a valuable treasure called the lost immortal bead. Even if it wasn't refined into a treasure, it could be directly ground into powder, which was a colorless and odorless poison. Although it wouldn't kill, its greatest effect was to turn a person into a retard. To cultivators, this kind of non-lethal poison was often more frightening than a lethal poison. However, whether it was its fur, bones, or eyeballs, they all needed to be harvested in large quantities to be refined into a treasure. In the immortal world, an enchanting vampire bat could be sold for about 1,000,000 divine-grade spirit stones. However, this kind of thing was rarely seen in the market. Those with high cultivation would not bother to get their hands on it, and those with low cultivation would find it difficult to get their hands on it. Although one enchanting vampire bat wasn't scary, if it was a group of them, it would be very difficult to fend them off without the cultivation of a great immortal. Unfortunately for them, enchanting vampire bats were social animals. The scariest thing was, there would usually be one or several vampire bat kings with decent cultivation as their leader. If an outsider wanted to take advantage of them, they would have to have some ability first. And the group of bats that Yu Qianqiu saw at this moment matched the enchanting vampire bats recorded in the Jade Archive. Each of them had a head that looked like a rat's, with pairs of sharp, shining eyes, like the cold stars in the sky. They spread their wings and circled in the sky, their forte being their speed. They came and went as fast as lightning. They seemed to be circling around Yu Qianqiu, with countless eyes that were as sharp as the cold stars staring at Yu Qianqiu. A savage aura was growing stronger. Chapter 847. Yu Qianqiu had a premonition that he was in trouble. It was very likely that these beasts were going to attack him. The pairs of snow-white fangs that were as sharp as steel nails on the rats' faces could explain everything. They were already ferocious. Indeed, as the ear-piercing screams intensified, a bat that was flying across the sky suddenly changed direction and shot toward Yu Qianqiu at lightning speed. It bared its fangs and bit at Yu Qianqiu's neck. "You're courting death, beast." Yu Qianqiu let out a furious bellow, and his 5 claws that were covered in purple light grabbed out. The bloody bat that was pouncing toward him did not even make a sound when it fell into his claws and instantly turned into ashes. Once the bloody bat that was the first to attack died, the other bloody bats that were flying in the sky immediately became agitated. Soon all of them stopped in the sky. The bloody bats that were the size of washbasins flapped their wings and hovered in the sky. They gathered together and stared at Yu Qianqiu fiercely under the night sky. Their eyes were like the cold stars in the night sky, emitting a demonic glow that could shine into one's heart. Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned. He immediately realized that there was something strange about these fellas' eyes, but it was already too late by the time he reacted. He felt his vision blur and his consciousness seemed to have fallen into a maze formed by the stars. He bumped around but could not find a way out, and he was trapped in the maze, unable to extricate himself. He could not control his body or communicate with Utopia, and his back was instantly drenched in cold sweat. He was fine after experiencing so many storms. If he were to die in the hands of these beasts, he would die too unjustly. His sharp intuition after cultivating animal tricks told him that a strong threat of death was approaching. After the enchanting bloody bats that were hovering in the sky knew that they had affected the other party's mind, the demonic starlight in their eyes retracted. All of them flapped their wings excitedly, revealing their fangs that were as long as chopsticks from their mouths as they swarmed over. In the blink of an eye, they had wrapped Yu Qianqiu up into a ball. Layers upon layers of flapping, they seemed to want to suck a mouthful of Yu Qianqiu's blood. It seemed that human blood was quite a temptation for them. The scene of tens of thousands of enchanting bloody bats fighting for food was very spectacular. Animals were animals. In order to get a mouthful of human blood, they were working together just a moment ago, but now they were killing each other. They pounced and tore at each other, opening their sharp claws to push away the layers of their own kind that were attached to Yu Qianqiu's body, trying their best to burrow inside. The fluffy blood bats piled up like a mountain as they screeched and swarmed around, making one's heart go numb. However, the strange thing was that even though there was an endless stream of blood bats surging over, the swarm of blood bats remained the same size. No matter how many blood bats gathered, the swarm did not grow. On a mountain not far away stood a handsome, clean-shaven man in black. His eyes flickered as he stared at the scene. His brows moved slightly as if he had noticed something amiss. Following that, he rubbed his lips in a circle and mumbled as if he was saying something, but no sound could be heard. However, the blood bats that had piled up on Yu Qianqiu's body caused a commotion. They lost interest in fighting for food and flew away in a hurry, as if they had been frightened by something. They all flew up and fled in panic. In the blink of an eye, they all disappeared into the corners of the mountain. Yu Qianqiu's slightly closed eyes slowly opened. There was a layer of black ash at his feet, and his body was surrounded by a faint purple fog. This purple fog was nothing but a tiny dew of the purple fire. It was a critical moment when his consciousness had been trapped. Perhaps he had sensed the danger, but the life spirit in his dantian had suddenly awakened. A dazzling golden light had exploded from his dantian, instantly dispersing the maze that had trapped his consciousness. As soon as he woke up, he saw the swarm of blood bats swarming over. Yu Qianqiu immediately felt the urge to kill. He had originally felt bad for disturbing everyone's rest because of a moment of curiosity. Who knew that they would want his life? Yu Qianqiu immediately had an evil thought. When the swarm of blood bats swarmed over, he put on a thick layer of golden armor. When his body was covered with biting blood bats, he immediately released a limited amount of the purple fire. He knew that if the purple fire were to burst out at once, it would kill many blood bats, but it would definitely scare away even more blood bats. He suppressed the use of the purple fire because he did not want to alarm the ones behind him. Instead, he killed them layer by layer until he attracted all the other blood bats. Then it would be time to completely kill this group of beasts. However, to his surprise, this group of beasts seemed to have suddenly become smart. Only a few thousand of them had died, but they all ran away at the same time. It was really strange. Yu Qianqiu slowly retracted the hot purple fog that surrounded his body. His suspicious eyes were slightly startled, and he met the eyes of the man in black on the hill not far away. The two of them looked at each other for a long time and did not separate. In the end, the man in black was the first to smile. He waved his wide sleeves, cupped his fists and said, "I am Xianxia. May I know which friend has come to visit my Thousand Bat Mountain? Please come closer and have a chat." Xianxia could not see through the depth of the man's cultivation. After thinking for a while, he dashed over, cupped his fists and said, "I am Xianxia. Are you the owner of this place, friend?" "You can say so," Xianxia replied non-committally, but there was a trace of surprise in his eyes. From the way Xianxia flew over, he vaguely sensed that Xianxia's cultivation was not yet at the immortal realm. However, with his early-stage great immortal cultivation, he could not see through Xianxia's cultivation. It was very strange. What did he mean by, "You can say so"? Xianxia frowned, but he still maintained his vigilance and asked, "May I know why friend called me here?" Xianxia turned around and pointed to a tall mountain in the distance. Even though the sky was turning dark, one could still faintly make out the buildings on the mountain. He smiled and said, "My Thousand Bat Mountain rarely receives guests. It's getting late. If you don't mind, why don't you come to my humble abode and let me be your host?" Xianxia pondered for a while. He wanted to refuse mainly because he was afraid that it would not be safe. But seeing how polite the other party was, plus he really wanted to make more friends in the immortal realm, he changed his mind and said, "Then I will have to trouble you." "I am looking forward to having more friends. How can you say that I am disturbing you? I am more than happy to have you. Please." Xianxia waved his hand happily. Xianxia raised his hand politely, and Xianxia immediately turned into a stream of light and landed on the peak. Xianxia quickly chased after him. As he flew near the peak, he paused for a moment to look at the building on the peak below. The building on the peak was not big, like a small Daoist temple. But the strange thing was that the whole building was directly carved out of the Daoist mountain. The building and the whole mountain were one. It was a unique scenery. However, no matter how Xianxia looked at it, he found it indescribably strange. Night had already fallen, so why was there not a single trace of light in the building? No matter how high the other party's cultivation was, this did not make sense. Chapter 848. When Xianxia extended his hand again, the hesitant Xianxia landed in front of the house. Xianxia smiled and turned to face the house. He waved his hand and slapped his chest. He opened his mouth and spat out dozens of phosphorescent lights that flew to every corner of the house. In the blink of an eye, the stone pillars and walls inside and outside the house were lit up with green flames. If one didn't look carefully, one wouldn't know that the bowl-like things protruding from the stone pillars and walls were actually fire troughs used for illumination. The entire mountaintop suddenly lit up, standing between heaven and earth like a green jewel. However, to Xianxia, who was inside, although the hall was bright, it was a patch of green. There was a sense of eeriness and terror everywhere. The green light shone on the smile on Xianxia's face, adding a sense of eeriness. It was very strange. Xianxia didn't know if he was thinking too much. Although the other party was very polite, he didn't let his guard down. He couldn't be blamed. He knew that on the path of cultivation, life and death were often decided by a thin line. There was no regret, only one need to take care of themselves. Not to mention this was a strange place. At Xianxia's invitation, the two of them walked into the house with the flickering green light. Xianxia calmly looked around the house. There were almost no furnishings in the house, only two stone chairs separated by a table. The strange thing was that the roof was covered with stone beams, and there were many traces of something being scratched on the stone beams. The layout of this stone house is really strange. Xianxia smiled and said casually, "It's just materials from the wilderness. It can't compare to the luxurious and exquisite outside." Xianxia pointed to the two chairs in the middle and smiled, "Brother, you please sit. Although I don't have anything good in this wilderness, I do have some fragrant tea that is rarely seen outside. Brother, you, please wait a moment, I'll go get it." "Brother Xiao is too polite. There's no need to trouble yourself." Xianxia waved his hand. Of course. This is how we treat our guests. I'll be there in a moment," Xianxia insisted. He quickly walked toward the stone door by the wall and walked down the stone stairs. Xianxia quickly scanned the surroundings. His gaze paused for a moment, fixated on the two chairs in the middle. Normally, the surface of a stone chair that people often sat on would be smooth, but the surface of these two stone chairs was rough, as if no one had ever sat on them. He tilted his head and glanced at the stone door. Then he gently floated up and silently flew into the stone door, following the stone stairs that spiraled downwards. It was so dark inside that he couldn't even see his fingers in front of him. After going dozens of meters deep into the belly of the mountain, a stone door blocked his way. Xianxia sneered and directly entered the wall beside the stone door. After fusing with the stone, he immediately sensed that there was a rather large space in the belly of the mountain. As he approached the edge of the space, the stone in front of him automatically melted to reveal a small hole the size of a soybean. Xianxia squinted his eyes and looked through the small hole. Inside, Xianxia was indeed seriously boiling a pot of tea. The light from the small stove illuminated Xianxia's meticulous expression. Xianxia heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that he was overthinking. Just as he was about to quietly return, he inadvertently discovered that there were pairs of cold, star-like eyes shining on the stone wall behind Xianxia, opening and closing from time to time. Enchanting blood bats. Xianxia squinted his eyes. He was all too familiar with this kind of gaze. He had almost fallen prey to it before. So he carefully looked again. He would not have known if he had not looked, but when he did, he was shocked. After a careful look, he found that there were countless enchanting blood bats hanging upside down on the stone wall behind Xianxia. If he did not look carefully, he would have mistaken them for the original color of the stone wall in the cave. Xianxia suddenly sneered again and again. It seemed that snakes and rats were in cahoots. His peeping pupils suddenly shrank. He saw Xianxia pick up the sand pot on the small stove and put it on the tray on the stone table. After opening the lid, he immediately saw that it was steaming hot. It was also at this moment that Xianxia's handsome and indifferent face suddenly became ferocious and terrifying. His mouth suddenly opened wide as if a gash had been torn on his face. It was a terrifying sight. The most unacceptable thing was that two snow-white fangs the length of half a chopstick suddenly flipped out of his open mouth. Xianxia leaned over the steaming sand pot. 2 drops of crystal-clear liquid seeped out of the 2 fangs and dripped into the sand pot. Then the 2 fangs retracted back into his mouth, and the hideous and terrifying face returned to normal and harmless appearance. Xianxia closed the lid of the sand pot and carried the tray with one hand. He calmly walked towards the stone door. "Dog. You actually want to poison me?" A fierce look flashed across Xianxia's face. He quietly and quickly left the stone wall. When he reappeared, he had already jumped out of the house. Then he expressionlessly walked to the stone chair and sat down. He slowly waited. He had already guessed Xianxia's identity from the 2 fangs that were exposed. It was obvious that he was the same species as the bats. He might even be the Bat King of the enchanting blood bats. After a while, Xianxia walked out of the stone door with a tray in his hand. He said with a smile, "I've made brother you wait for a long time." Xianxia smiled and waved his hand. "It's fine. Since we were just passing by to rest, it's good to find something to do. Let's start with tea." Xianxia was slightly startled. He didn't understand what Xiaoqian meant. He placed the tray on the table and began to pour tea into the 2 teacups. The tea that was clear like golden soup rolled in the teacup, emitting a refreshing fragrance. Xianxia's 5 fingers that were placed on the table tapped as he praised. "It is indeed good tea, brother Xiao has worked hard." Xianxia placed a cup in front of Xianxia and smiled. "Brother Yu, please have a taste and see how it tastes." Xianxia picked up the teacup and looked inside. He saw a handful of scarlet and glistening leaves in the teacup. They were very different from ordinary tea leaves. He could not help frowning and said, "Brother Xiao, why are these tea leaves red? You didn't poison them, right?" Xianxia's face stiffened. He didn't expect Xiaoqian to be so direct. He quickly waved his hand and said, "Brother, you misunderstood. This is a specialty of my myriad bat mountain. It is called red leaf tea. It is definitely not poisonous." He picked up the cup in front of him and took a big sip to show that it was not poisonous. "I've never heard of a poisonous snake being able to kill itself with its own poison." Xianxia silently cursed before laughing. "I'm just joking. Brother Xiao doesn't need to take it seriously. If I really suspected the tea was poisoned, I wouldn't have said it out loud. Besides, I have no enmity with Brother Xiao. Plus, I don't have anything valuable on me. Brother Xiao has no reason to harm me." Don't you think so? Yes, yes, yes. Brother Yu really knows how to joke. Hehe. Xiao Changquan laughed to cover up his embarrassment. In fact, he was very nervous because of Yu Qianchou's words. He couldn't figure out Yu Qianchou's cultivation. Otherwise, he wouldn't have to waste so much effort. If he really found out that the tea was poisoned, it would be troublesome. Who would have thought that Yu Qianchou would be even more forthright than he had imagined? He picked up the teacup and didn't even taste it, directly pouring the tea leaves into his mouth. Like a cow drinking water, he gulped it all down. Xiao Changquan was stunned. Yu Qianchou slapped the cup on the table and wiped his mouth. Goody. Another cup. Actually, if it wasn't poisoned, the tea would be a rare good tea. But what made Xiao Changquan speechless was that if you poured the tea directly into your stomach, can you drink good tea? Xiao Changquan naturally wanted him to drink more, so he filled his cup with the sand pot. Who knew that before the sand pot was put down, Yu Qianchou picked up the cup and poured the tea into his mouth. He slapped the cup on the table and shouted again, "Good tea." Another cup. Xiao Changquan smiled apologetically and continued to pour water into the cup. Yu Qianchou was still the same. He picked up the cup and drank it without any hesitation. In the end, cup after cup, the sand pot was quickly finished by Yu Qianchou. Looking at the empty sand pot, Yu Qianchou frowned. It's good tea, but there's not enough. Do you have more? Heh heh. Xiao Changquan laughed awkwardly. If Brother Yu wants more, I'll go brew another pot. Although he said that, he didn't take action. He looked at Yu Qianchou suspiciously, as if asking why there was no reaction. Yu Qianchou saw from his eyes that it was time for him to be poisoned, so he made an "is" sound, rubbed his forehead and said with a bitter expression, "Why do I feel a little uncomfortable, a little dizzy? A little dizzy. This tea?" Before he finished speaking, he closed his eyes and directly slid down from the chair to the ground, motionless. Xiao Changquan stood up abruptly. At first he was happy, but then he was stunned. He muttered to himself, "This poison can only hurt one's mind. I've never seen it make someone unconscious. Yes, this guy must have drunk too much. He deserves it." He turned around and walked to the door. Standing at the door, he looked up at the sky and let out a long whistle. Not long after, chattering noises rang out in the night sky. A group of black shadows flew across the starry sky and swarmed over. Yu Qianchou was very familiar with the chattering noises. He couldn't help but open his eyes to peek. He wanted to see what the fairy was going to do to him. In fact, he had the same worries as Xiao Changquan. He couldn't figure out how powerful the fairy was, so he didn't dare to act rashly. He could only take one step at a time. If it really didn't work, he could only flash back to Utopia to hide. Suddenly, there was a rush of flapping wings outside the door, and a group of black shadows quickly flashed in. After circling in the house for a while, all of them hung upside down on the beams of the roof, folded their wings, and stared at the roof beams with cold star-like eyes. It was the ecstasy bloody bats. Only now did Yu Qianchou react. It turned out that the stone beams on the roof were for these beasts to step on. No wonder there were so many scratches on them. They were all scratched by the claws of these beasts. Xiao Changquan, who strode back, summoned a black net from his storage bracelet. With a flash of black light, it immediately tied up Yu Qianchou tightly. Xiao Changquan waved his hand and said, "Bring him back to the ancestor." Chapter 849. When Yu Qianchou heard that, he immediately felt depressed. There's also an ancestor? There's a super old monster behind this guy? What the hell? The sound of flapping wings could be heard on the roof. A group of bats hanging upside down on the roof beam swooped down and grabbed onto the net, flapping their wings in unison. Yu Qianchou felt his center of gravity become unstable, and the lingering stench was unbearable. His entire body had already left the ground and was moving. This feeling was very unpleasant, so he opened his eyes and looked around blankly. When Xiao Changquan saw this, he was shocked. However, when he saw that Yu Qianchou's eyes were blank and lifeless, he immediately laughed and waved his hand. "Brother Yu, the taste of this tea must be pretty good. Have a safe journey. I'm sure my ancestor will be very happy to see you. I won't be sending you off." Yu Qianchou looked at him blankly as if he had never seen him before. His entire body was dragged out of the house by a group of large bats. He looked at himself getting further and further away from the building at the top of the mountain. Xiao Changquan was still standing outside the house and waving at him with a smile. "Dog, don't be happy too early. There will be a time for you to cry." Yu Qianchou gritted his teeth and cursed in his heart. Actually, when he poured the poisonous tea into his mouth, it was directly sent to Utopia to water the plants. He didn't touch a single drop. He was fully capable of escaping now, but after thinking about it, he decided to let nature take its course and take a look. If he wanted to take revenge, he had to find out the other party's background first. If he wanted to take revenge, he wouldn't even know what was going on. If he wanted to do it, he had to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. A group of blood bats used a net to slowly drag Xianxia into the depths of the mountains. Actually, it was quite comfortable to sway like this, but the stench emitted by the group of bats was really unpleasant. Xianxia resisted the urge to explode. Under the starry sky, the ground was like an abyss, making it impossible to know where one was. The group of bats surrounded Xianxia and slowly descended into the largest abyss. After descending for about 100 meters, they dragged him horizontally into a cave in the mountain wall. The cave was quite long. After flying for a while, a warm and gentle light gradually appeared. Xianxia felt quite curious and wanted to see his surroundings. However, he was completely blocked by the damned bats, and he could only vaguely sense the light shining in. Xianxia felt quite curious. Just as he was turning his head to look around, he suddenly felt himself losing his balance. His eyes lit up and the blood bats released their claws, allowing him to fall rapidly. His eyes lit up. The group of blood bats had already released their claws and he was falling rapidly. Before he could react, he heard a bang sound. Xianxia was in a daze and his face was twitching. He could only watch as the group of bats flew back the way they came. Soon he was attracted by the environment he was in. This was a huge palace and it was a rare jade palace. Everywhere was smooth and white jade and there were all kinds of jade carvings. There was even a milky white luminous pearl that was the size of 2 fists hanging on top of the palace. The gentle light was reflected in every corner of the jade palace, and it was very beautiful. The entire jade palace was integrated, and it should be a jade palace that was directly excavated from a large jade vein. Such a luxurious scene made Xianxia secretly exclaim in admiration. This was really a good place. As he was looking around, his eyes suddenly froze and his pupils suddenly shrank. On the 9-step-high platform in the main hall, there was a thick jade couch, and on it sat a man in a green robe with his eyes closed. He had green hair, green eyebrows, and a green mustache. He had a protruding mouth and monkey cheeks. Needless to say, this person must be Xiao Changkun's ancestor. Xianxia pondered for a while, and just as he was considering whether to leave, he suddenly saw the man on the jade couch open his eyes. Xianxia was startled. He suddenly had the urge to laugh in his heart. He finally understood why a person would be described as shifty-eyed. The word shifty-eyed was simply born for this person. But this person didn't know that he had a mustache that belonged to a rat. However, his pair of small eyes that were rolling around were still quite spirited. Another one. It just so happens that I haven't had one in a long time. The man with the protruding mouth, monkey cheeks, and rat eyes nodded with satisfaction. He slowly floated out of the couch and stood on the ground, swinging his incomparably wide sleeves as he strode over. Without a word, he raised his foot and kicked Xianxia's thigh twice. He twirled his mustache and clicked his tongue. I really couldn't tell. You don't look strong, but your body is full of muscle and you must have a lot of blood essence. You're only at soul formation stage, how come you can't even see through me? The strength of those 2 kicks was not small, and Xianxia had to clench his teeth to restrain himself from cursing. Just as he was thinking about how to find an opportunity to launch a sneak attack with the purple flames, he saw the azure-clothed man open his mouth and spit out an egg-sized bead. The entire bead shone with a dazzling azure light, and it was filled with a boundless and powerful aura. It instantly lit up the entire palace and it was extremely eye-catching. The cyan bead slowly floated towards Xianxia, who was trapped in the net. The cyan light shone in all directions. Every time the azure light was spat out, Xianxia could feel a huge pressure pressing down on him. Every time the bead retracted, he felt as if the blood in his body was about to burst out. The azure bead slowly moved along the surface of Xianxia's body. Xianxia gripped a purple flame in his palm and he secretly complained. His entire face was flushed red as he forcefully resisted and endured, hoping to find an opportunity to launch a sneak attack. The man excitedly rubbed his hands together and cackled. Not bad, not bad. Your physique is not bad. This is a delicious meal, let me have a good taste. Xianxia was greatly shocked. It was clear that the opponent was going to make a killing move, but he didn't have the confidence to land a hit. From the corner of his eyes, he saw the azure bead moving up from his lower body, and his heart suddenly moved. Almost at the same time, Xianxia made up his mind. With lightning speed, he directly broke through the net and grabbed the azure bead in his hand. He quickly teleported to the corner of the palace, and with a flash of purple light, the net that was binding him turned into ashes in the blink of an eye. The man in blue was stunned. He couldn't believe that someone could easily break through the black gold net. After he came back to his senses, he angrily screamed, "Give me back my inner core." "Stop!" Xianxia shouted. He didn't dare to let the man near him. The hand that was covered in purple light tightly held onto the azure bead in his hand. However, the azure bead in his hand was not under his control. It struggled more and more, and it was not something that he could control with his cultivation. Left with no choice, the power of the purple fire suddenly exerted pressure on it. The azure bead in his hand let out a sizzling sound, trembled, and immediately became obedient. To be honest, Xianxia didn't want to destroy the azure bead in his hand. Without a doubt, the treasure that was hidden in the opponent's body was definitely not simple. It was just the right thing to use to threaten the opponent. If he destroyed it, the opponent would definitely fight him to the death. As long as he couldn't kill the opponent, he would undoubtedly make a mortal enemy in the immortal world. Just as he used the purple fire to pressure the azure bead, the man in blue let out an "ah" and held his head with both hands, letting out a shrill scream. Xianxia was startled. He looked at the azure bead in his hand and realized that this thing was actually connected to the strange man's body. If the azure bead was damaged, the opponent would also be implicated. Thinking about the two words "inner core" that the opponent said, he immediately understood. It must be the opponent's inner core, no wonder. Looking at the strange man who was trembling in pain, Xianxia immediately had an evil thought. If he directly destroyed this inner core, would he be able to get rid of this future trouble? With this evil thought in mind, he immediately put it into action. Purple light circulated in his palm, and the incomparably strong and intense temperature of the purple fire instantly acted on the azure bead. The green-clothed man immediately let out a blood-curdling scream. His entire body exploded into a cloud of green mist with a wong sound. A huge green shadow appeared and flew around the huge palace while screaming "Wah wah." Quickly stop, we can discuss anything." His cries for mercy echoed in the palace. Xianxia stared dumbfoundedly at the huge green shadow that revealed its original form. The opponent's original form was actually a huge green bat with a wingspan of 5 to 6 meters. He had never seen such a huge bat before, and it was green in color. Hearing the opponent say that everything could be discussed, Xianxia's eyes brightened. He immediately regained his composure and controlled the power of the purple fire. The huge green bat's body softened, and with a "pada" sound, it fell to the ground while shivering. It was truly a huge lump, and it was an eye-opener for Xianxia. Buzz! The green mist exploded, and the huge bat once again transformed into its human form. It crawled on the ground while shivering and wailed, "Shao Chongquan, you little bastard, I have always treated you well, yet you dare to frame me." It was crying so pitifully that even if someone's parents died, they might not necessarily be as sad as he was. Xianxia looked at the azure bead in his hand and immediately laughed. It really was a lucky hit. He didn't think that he would be forced to act and he would actually be able to grab this old monster's weak spot. Interesting. He immediately coughed and said, "Don't cry so much, this matter has nothing to do with that little bastard. I was the one who let him capture me." Ah. The bluish-clothed man suddenly stopped crying. He raised his tear-stained face and choked with sobs. "Is what you said true? I am a person who dares to say anything, but I will never lie." Xianxia patted his chest as a guarantee and then immediately sneered, "That little bastard actually tricked me into drinking poison tea, but he found the wrong target. How could a mere poison tea do anything to me? So I beat him at his own game. I wanted to see what that little bastard was up to, see who his backer was and why he dared to scheme against me. I didn't expect you to be the backer who allowed him to run amok. Today you are out of luck." Hearing that it was like this, the bluish-clothed man immediately stopped crying. Instead, he appeared to be somewhat comforted. He waved his wide sleeves to wipe away his tears and directly stood up. However, his legs were still a bit weak and he swayed a few times before stabilizing himself. It was clear that he had suffered quite a bit just now. On his already pale face, His small eyes darted around and he cupped his hands in apology. This is truly a misunderstanding. Normally, that little bastard Xiao Chongquan wouldn't easily make a move against others because we also don't want to cause trouble. Chapter 850. According to what you're saying, I was the one who started the trouble? Yu Qianchou looked at the green bead trapped by the purple flames with malicious intent. The azure-clothed man jumped in fright and waved his hand in panic. No, it must be that little bastard's brain that's running amok. I'll definitely take care of him after this. Yu Qianchou snorted. What does it have to do with me whether you take care of him or not? What I want to ask is, there's no enmity between us, so why did you try to kill me? The azure-clothed man was speechless. How could he explain this clearly? Since you were sent here, I naturally had to kill you. After dawdling for a while, he smiled awkwardly. May I know your name and which sect in the celestial world you're from? I'm Wei Chuanqiu and I have some acquaintances in the celestial world. Perhaps I know your sect's elders. Don't try to make connections, it's useless. Yu Qianchou waved his hand and interrupted. I'm a wandering cultivator without a sect, so I definitely have no relationship with you. Right now your inner core is in my hands. I only need a thought to completely destroy it. Tell me, how are you going to settle the debt of killing me? The azure-clothed man's eyes darted around and he let out a sigh of relief. The meaning behind the other's words was very clear. There was a lot of room for negotiation, so the result wouldn't be too bad. He paused and probed. You didn't lose anything after all, but my cultivation was damaged. How about this, we'll let this matter go. You return my inner core to me and we'll pretend nothing happened. We won't pursue this matter. What do you think? Yu Qianchou immediately sneered. You're really dreaming. Do you really think I'm made of clay? You'll tell me after you're done playing with me. You must be joking. Damn it. I was brought here by a group of stinky bats and almost lost my life. Who's going to pay for my mental damage? The azure-clothed man really didn't understand Yu Qianchou. Now that he had the upper hand, he wouldn't let this matter go if he didn't get the most out of it. Even if he wanted to give up, he couldn't leave behind an enemy to cause trouble in the future. Compensation for mental damage? The azure-clothed man muttered to himself. He thought for a long time before weakly asking, if you want money, why don't you just tell me a number? Talking about money is too vulgar. Do you think I'm someone who needs money? Yu Qianchou said disdainfully. The green-clothed man was stunned. Then what does this compensation for mental damage refer to? Yu Qianchou stared at the green bead trapped in the purple flames in his hand and said indifferently, compensation for mental damage. I mean a price that will compensate me for my fright. The man in green scratched his head. He couldn't figure it out. He also felt a lingering fear from Qingzhu's gaze on the inner core in his hand. The feeling just now was too painful and unbearable. It was the first time in his life that he had suffered like this. He didn't know what treasure was flashing with purple light in Qingzhu's hand. It had such great power that it could easily damage his inner core. In the end, he couldn't take it anymore and said bluntly, what do you want as compensation? Just say it. Don't beat around the bush. It depends on how much you can pay and whether you have the ability to pay the compensation I want. If the compensation you give is only enough to send a beggar away, then I'd rather destroy this inner core to vent the hatred in my heart. Yu Qianchou said disapprovingly. You're questioning my Wei Chuanqiu's ability? The azure-clothed man was startled. He pointed at his nose and said in surprise, have you never heard of me, Wei Chuanqiu, in the Immortal realm? Or do you not want to settle this matter? Wei Chuanqiu? Yu Qianchou said suspiciously, I really haven't heard of you. Are you very famous in the Immortal realm? So you haven't heard of me. No wonder you're so daring. It seems that I've been cultivating in seclusion for too long. The juniors in the Immortal realm haven't even heard of my name. Wei Chuanqiu's small eyes faintly revealed a trace of nostalgia. He sighed, I've been cultivating in seclusion in this jade palace for too long. I'm afraid it's been more than 10,000 years. Back then, although I wasn't a top expert in the Immortal realm, I was still a famous figure. Famous? Yu Qianchou looked up and down at Wei Chuanqiu, who had a pointy mouth, monkey cheeks and shifty-eyed eyes. He doubted that this person who was easily controlled by him could be famous in the Immortal realm. Wei Chuanqiu's small eyes flickered as he looked at him. He swung his big sleeves behind his back. He stood up straight and said proudly, although I, Wei Chuanqiu, am not a top expert in the Immortal realm, I'm still an early-stage Immortal Emperor. Back then, who in the immortal realm didn't know me, the green-winged bat king Wei Chuanqiu? Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. Green-winged bat king Wei Chuanqiu? He suddenly thought of the Ming cult's 4 great guardian kings. Now he was a little suspicious that this guy was also a transmigrator. Wei Chuanqiu's eyes lit up. He said excitedly, "How is it? Have you heard of me?" Yu Qianqiu frowned and whispered, "Isn't the green-winged bat king called Wei Yixiao? How did it become Wei Chuanqiu? Who's Wei Yixiao?" Wei Chuanqiu's face gradually became angry. Could it be that someone is pretending to be me, the green-winged bat king? Yu Qianqiu came back to his senses. He knew that it was purely a coincidence. He shook his head. "No, I just said it casually. I couldn't tell that you're an early-stage immortal emperor." "Good, very good." He stared at Wei Chuanqiu with shining eyes. "Now I believe that you have the ability to compensate for my mental damage. It's good that you believe me." Wei Chuanqiu nodded in satisfaction. "Return the inner core to me. As long as it's within my capabilities, I will agree to it. I won't go back on my words." He thought that his name was worth something, but who would have thought that Yu Qianqiu wouldn't buy it? He raised his eyebrows and stared at the Niden in his hand. "If you take it back and then come back to kill me, then I won't have anything to rely on. That's too unfair for me. I have a good idea. Not only can you get your inner core back, but I can also get the compensation I want for my mental loss." "What idea? Tell me." Wei Chuanqiu's eyebrows twitched. He had a feeling that the other party's idea wouldn't be a good one. "I'm just saying I don't need you to agree. Don't be rash. If I get nervous and destroy your inner core, then I'm sorry." Yu Qianqiu first gave him a warning so that he would be mentally prepared. He then plucked up his courage and said, "Actually, it's not a big deal. I just want to borrow 100 years of your time as compensation." "Borrow 100 years? Wei Chuanqiu's eyes flickered. "What do you mean? Explain it clearly." Cough cough. Yu Qianqiu coughed twice and curled his lips. "Very simple. You serve me for 100 years. After 100 years, I will return your inner core to you." Wei Chuanqiu's eyes widened and he raged, "T. You want to enslave me for 100 years? He seemed to be willing to fight. "Don't be rash," Yu Qianqiu shouted. He raised the inner core that was surrounded by purple flames and said, "I'm warning you. If I accidentally destroy it, don't regret it." "You." Wei Chuanqiu stomped his feet in anger and said, "Brat, you're courting death. You dare threaten me? Damn it. There's no such thing as a free lunch in this world." Yu Qianqiu's temper flared. The purple light in his hand shone brightly and he raised his eyebrows. "I'm threatening you. What can you do to me?" Wei Chuanqiu was so angry that he started yelling. He pointed his finger and shouted, "If worst comes to worst, I'll lose a lot of my cultivation today. I don't want to be bullied by you. *CK. You attacked first. You think you're in the right? I don't want to be bullied by you." Yu Qianqiu's mouth was fast, but his hands were even faster. He immediately attacked. The purple light in his hand immediately wrapped around the shining green inner core and started to twist. Wei Chuanqiu held his head and screamed. With a wung sound, the green mist exploded. A huge and ferocious-looking green-winged bat immediately flew around the palace. As if its butt was on fire, it screamed and begged for mercy. "Stop, stop. We can talk about it, bastard. You refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit." Yu Qianqiu angrily controlled the power of the purple flames. With a pata sound, the huge green bat directly fell to the ground. At this time, Xianxia's bloody mouth continuously cried out, "I'm dying of discomfort. Your father have had 8 lifetimes of bad luck. Why did I have to go into seclusion to cultivate this 10,000 demons heart sutra? If I didn't form this broken Dan, how could I have suffered like this?" With a buzz sound, the green mist exploded. Wei Chuanqiu, who was crawling on the ground, staggered to his feet. Not only did his face become even paler, he was swaying back and forth on the spot. He seemed to be unable to even stand steadily, as if he was drunk. It could be seen that the damage to his inner core had a great impact on him. However, while he was swaying, he didn't forget to wave at Yu Qianqiu and said, "Kid, don't mess around anymore. We can talk about it. If you do it again, my cultivation will fall below the early immortal emperor stage. If that really happens, even if I'm beaten back to my original form, I'll still kill you." Yu Qianqiu coldly snorted and said, "I'm much more polite than you are. If you don't act recklessly, I naturally won't act recklessly. The purple light in his hand disappeared along with the shining cyan inner core in his hand. Wei Chunqiu suddenly realized that he had lost contact with the inner core. He suddenly looked around and said anxiously, "My inner core, where did you take it? Give it back to me." "Don't worry. I've kept it in a very safe place. Other than me, no one else can find it." Yu Qianzhou said disapprovingly. Actually, he didn't dare to keep the inner core in his hand. His opponent's cultivation was too high for him. It was very possible that his opponent would accidentally take it away. Wei Chunqiu looked at his body and heaved a sigh of relief. If his inner core was destroyed, not only would his cultivation fall, he would also be beaten back to his original form. Now that he was still standing here, it meant that the inner core was indeed safe and sound. However, the strange thing was that he couldn't sense the location of the inner core at such a close distance. Logically speaking, it was impossible. This was really strange. Chapter 851. Just as he was feeling puzzled, he caught sight of Yu Qianzhou's empty hands. He was stunned and a ferocious glint flashed in his eyes. Yu Qianzhou narrowed his eyes. He knew that he was in trouble, but he endured it and didn't flee. As expected, Wei Chunqiu had already disappeared from the spot. His neck tightened and his entire body immediately became immobile. Wei Chunqiu's sinister laughter rang in his ears. "Little brat, you're still too inexperienced to fight with me. Where's the inner core? Hand it over obediently." "Old bastard." Yu Qianzhou cursed in his heart. His neck was tightly gripped by Wei Chunqiu and his throat was gurgling, but he couldn't say a word. But even so, he still didn't flash back to Utopia. Wei Chunqiu couldn't be bothered to waste time with him. He directly pulled the storage bag off his waist and checked it with one hand. He was stunned to find that it was empty. There wasn't even a strand of hair. He immediately threw it behind him and shook Yu Qianzhou's neck, scolding, "What's wrong with you? You don't have anything and yet you're still hanging a lousy bag on your waist?" As he spoke, his hands didn't stop moving. His sharp claws danced in the air, and with a hissing sound the rags flew around the palace. In the blink of an eye, all of Yu Qianzhou's clothes were torn to pieces. However, he didn't find what he was looking for. Wei Chunqiu grabbed Yu Qianzhou's neck like he was holding a duck that had its feathers removed. He shook his neck crazily and shouted, "Where is it? Where did you hide my inner core? Hand it over." "Bastard. Are you a pig? How am I supposed to speak when you're grabbing my neck?" Yu Qianzhou felt that his neck was about to break and his eyes were blurry from the shaking. He kept rolling his eyes, but the other party was so anxious that he didn't notice anything. There was no need to doubt that this fellow was a ruthless person. Even if he was stripped naked and suffered such humiliation, he still clenched his teeth and endured it without dodging. Otherwise, with just a thought, he could safely escape the clutches of the demon and return to Utopia. But he just didn't want to. Wei Chunqiu's expression froze as he recovered from his impatience. He also realized his mistake. He immediately released his 5 claws and clasped onto Yu Qianzhou's shoulder. Fortunately, Yu Qianzhou was not an ordinary person. Otherwise, he would have been dead. The red-faced Yu Qianzhou coughed twice and took a few deep breaths to calm himself down. Even though he couldn't move, he still gritted his teeth and said, "Wei Chunqiu, you old bastard, you're obviously taking revenge on me. Fine, you win, but listen carefully. Since I dared to do this, I'm not afraid of you. I've already teleported the item away. If anything happens to me, someone will immediately destroy your inner core. None of us will have an easy time. Even if I die, it'll be worth it if I can drag an immortal emperor expert down with me." Teleported away. Wei Chunqiu was stunned. He thought for a long time but couldn't figure out what that meant. Then he flew into a rage and said, "Stop fooling me." Without saying anything, he punched Yu Qianzhou's abs. As Yu Qianzhou's body flew up, he spat out a mouthful of blood. However, he couldn't fly away. Wei Chunqiu's 5 claws dug into his shoulder and dragged him back. In an instant, blood flowed from Yu Qianzhou's shoulder, and the pain penetrated deep into his bones. "Old bastard. If you dare to attack again, don't blame me for being impolite. I'll immediately make your cultivation fall below the early Immortal Emperor stage." Yu Qianzhou roared with blood in his mouth. Wei Chunqiu grabbed his shoulder and gave another heavy punch. Yu Qianzhou's body flew up and he spat out another mouthful of blood. His 5 claws dug deep into his shoulder and dragged him back again. Wei Chunqiu sneered, "Stubborn dead duck, do you really think this Bat King is a pushover? This is just an appetizer. If you don't hand it over obediently, I'll let you have a taste of this Bat King's soul-searching technique. Then you'll know what it means to live a life worse than death. I'll ask you again, are you going to hand it over or not? When Xianxia heard this, he opened his bloody mouth and sneered. He finally understood that he had miscalculated and suffered a great loss this time. His plan had been for nothing and he had bled for nothing. Not everyone was so easy to scare. To deal with this old fox, one had to use a direct and effective method. If you're polite, the other party won't be polite. Old bastard. You asked for it, don't blame me. Xianxia's eyes were filled with hatred. Little bastard, you still dare to be stubborn. You really won't shed tears until you see the coffin. Then I'll let you have a taste of soul-searching. Xianxia's words stopped abruptly. His evil smile froze on his face. His two small eyes widened as if he had seen something unbelievable. The 5 claws that dug into Xianxia's shoulder were covered in blood. However, Xianxia himself had disappeared without a trace under his eyes. It's over. Xianxia instantly panicked. He didn't even dream that Xianxia would do this. His inner Dan was still in the other party's hands. The anxious Xianxia flashed a series of afterimages in the palace. He searched every corner of the Jade Palace in hopes of finding Xianxia. However, after searching the entire palace, he couldn't find a trace of Xianxia. Xianxia didn't stop. In a flash, he turned into a ray of light and shot towards the tunnel outside the palace. He firmly believed that Xianxia must have used some sort of camouflage technique. With his cultivation, he wouldn't be able to escape far. There was definitely a chance to catch him. However, when the ray of light flashed halfway through the tunnel, it immediately stopped. Xianxia stood in the tunnel and suddenly turned around. He stared in the direction of the Jade Palace. He suddenly sensed his inner Dan again. It was in the Jade Palace. Without thinking further, he turned into a ray of light and quickly returned. In the end, what he was worried about still happened. Inside the Grand Jade Palace, between 2 pools of blood and tattered clothes, Xianxia stood there with a cold smile. The blood on his face and mouth was still there. However, he had put on his clothes again. That damned purple light appeared in his palm again. The scariest thing was that the purple light was still trapping his shining green inner Dan. It was truly a matter of life and death. Xianxia's mind was in a daze. He knew that he was in big trouble. He had just defended the other party. The other party was obviously here for revenge. He immediately waved his hands and begged, "Please don't do anything rash. Please don't do anything rash. Everything can be discussed." "Discuss my ass." Xianxia's angry roar echoed throughout the Jade Palace. He cursed, "Old bastard. Now you know fear? Just now I showed my sincerity to discuss with you, but you tried to kill me. If I fall for your tricks again, I'll write the 3 words Xianxia upside down. Now I'll let you have your fill." "Don't." Xianxia shouted anxiously, "There's no need to discuss. Whatever you say, I'll agree to it." Xianxia, who was about to kill him, was startled. He could still consider agreeing to anything. He squinted his eyes and said, "No matter what I say, you'll really agree to it?" Xianxia looked at the purple light in Xianxia's palm. He nodded and said, "You're Xianxia, right? As long as it's not too excessive, I'll agree to it." "You bastard. You actually lowered your standards again. Are your words **T? Xianxia roared, "I want to beat you up now to vent my anger. Do you agree?" The purple light in his hand suddenly increased. Xianxia was so frightened that he said, "Yes, I agree." "Bastard." Xianxia put away the purple fire and inner core. He rolled up his sleeves and strode forward. He pointed at the frightened Xianxia and shouted, "You're not allowed to dodge. You're not allowed to use your cultivation to resist. Otherwise, I'll make you wish you were dead." While Xianxia was dumbfounded, Xianxia took a few steps forward. His 2 fists were covered with a thick golden armor, and it was the kind of golden armor that was covered with teeth nails. With a "hoo" sound, he swung his fist that was as big as a casserole. A bang sound was followed by a "ah" scream, and Xianxia's small body fell to the ground. If one didn't rely on their cultivation to resist, it would be very difficult. "Bastard, you dare to hit me?" Xianxia kept on cursing. He hugged Xianxia and gave him a beating. He punched and kicked Xianxia until Xianxia was like a pig being slaughtered. Xianxia wouldn't be able to vent his anger if he didn't beat him to his heart's content. He remembered that he was stripped naked by this old man before. He pounced on Wei Chuanqiu and tore at him. In the blink of an eye, he stripped Wei Chuanqiu naked. Wei Chuanqiu was worthy of being an old monster. His skin was really thick. Yu Qianqiu's golden armor nails were flattened, but this guy didn't even have a scratch on his body. Yu Qianqiu was even more furious. He withdrew the golden armor on his fists. He casually took out a large piece of nether iron. His palms shone with purple light, and in the blink of an eye, he made a simple mace that was nearly 2 meters long. The most eye-catching thing was the sharp fangs on the mace. The skinny and naked Wei Chuanqiu lay on the ground. He covered his private parts with both hands and said in fear, "Yu Qianqiu, what are you trying to do? What do you think I'm doing? I haven't had my fill yet." Before he finished speaking, Yu Qianqiu swung the crudely made mace and smashed it on Wei Chuanqiu's head. The strength of the mace was not small. It smashed on Wei Chuanqiu's head. Wei Chuanqiu, who didn't dare to use his cultivation to resist, was immediately swung by a huge force and slid more than 10 meters on the smooth jade ground. Yu Qianqiu carried the mace and rushed over while shouting. In addition to the bloodstains on his face, his aura was unusually fierce. Wei Chuanqiu's heart trembled in fear. He hugged his head with both arms and bent over. His legs shrunk and his whole body curled into a ball. Yu Qianqiu didn't care how pitiful his small body looked. He rushed over and raised the nether iron mace that looked even bigger than Wei Chuanqiu's small body. With a series of ping-ping sounds, he smashed Wei Chuanqiu with his fists and legs. The Jade Palace immediately echoed with Wei Chuanqiu's miserable cries. They lingered for a long time. Chapter 852. At his level of cultivation, his body was already extraordinary. Even if he didn't use his cultivation to resist, ordinary things wouldn't be able to hurt him. But if he didn't use his cultivation to resist, he would still feel the pain. After all, he wasn't a dead person. What's more, Yu Qianqiu was also a cultivator, so he didn't hold back when he beat him. Plus, the dark steel mace was quite sturdy, so Wei Chuanqiu's fate could be imagined. After a long time, the wailing and howling in the Jade Palace stopped. Wei Chuanqiu, whose hair was as messy as weeds, was naked in a corner of the Jade Palace. He covered his private parts with his hands and weakly raised his bruised and swollen head to peek. The dark steel mace was already deformed. Yu Qianqiu held it and panted slightly. He had finally vented the anger in his heart. He hadn't felt so good in a long time. He felt a lot more relaxed. He twisted his neck, stared at Wei Chuanqiu and said in an unquestionable tone, "Serve me for 100 years. After 100 years I'll return the inner core to you. Of course, if you perform well, I might return it after a decade or two. What do you think?" Wei Chuanqiu curled up in a corner and said with infinite resentment, "Do I have a choice?" No. Yu Qianqiu immediately rejected the idea. Then he swung the deformed mace in his hand and it flew to the other side of the palace with a clanking sound. He clapped his hands and said, "You hit me before and I hit you now. Our previous grievances are written off. In the next 100 years, we'll get along well and work together." Wei Chuanqiu's mouth twitched. He wanted to curse, but he held it in. Then he closed his mouth and a cloud of green mist exploded from his body. When the mist dissipated, he changed into a new set of clothes and the bruises on his face disappeared. After getting up, he looked around and found that the jade floor of the Jade Palace was a mess. There were potholes everywhere and all kinds of jade sculptures had fallen. It was really unsightly. Bat King Wei, you really know how to find a place. You actually opened up such a luxurious place to cultivate. Yu Qianqiu looked around and praised. He seemed to have written off all the grievances from before, as if the destruction of this place had nothing to do with him. Wei Chuanqiu's face was originally filled with resentment, but his expression changed when he heard this. He slowly shook his head and sighed, "I didn't create this place. I discovered it by accident. This place is the cultivation place of the peerless master, Tai Shu Zheng. It's a pity that we've ruined it. It's really disrespectful." Peerless expert Tai Shu Zheng? Yu Qianqiu was startled. He racked his brains for a moment, but he didn't seem to have heard of such a person before. He couldn't help asking suspiciously, "A person who can be called a peerless expert shouldn't be a nameless person. How come I've never heard of such a person?" "That's because you're ignorant." Wei Chuanqiu was halfway through his words when he immediately remembered that Tai Shu was pinching his sore spot. He couldn't afford to offend this guy now, so he immediately changed his words. It's normal that you haven't heard of him. This person became famous earlier than Immortal Emperor Jin Tai. When he shocked the three realms, Immortal Emperor Jin Tai was still nowhere to be found. I guess there aren't many people in the younger generation who know of Tai Shuzheng. Became famous earlier than Immortal Emperor Jin Tai? Yu Qianzhou was slightly shocked. He looked around the huge jade palace and after careful observation he found that there was a faint sense of vicissitudes. He asked in disbelief, "Why have I never heard of such a person? Could it be that he has already gone to the legendary god realm?" Wei Chuanqiu shook his head and sighed with admiration on his face. It's said that with his cultivation he was qualified to ascend to the god realm. However, he was killed by someone. Yu Qianzhou was stunned when he heard this. He was stunned and said, his cultivation was high enough to ascend to the god realm, but he was killed by someone. Oh my god. Who would have such an ability? Could it be that someone from the god realm did it? Wei Chuanqiu shook his head again and turned to walk up to the 9-tiered high platform. After he got on the high platform he bent down and touched the thick and simple jade couch. He said slowly, "That is a story that has been sealed for countless years. I'm not sure what exactly happened. A long time ago, there was a peerless expert among the demon cultivators who shocked the three realms. He was called the ancestor of all demons by the demon cultivators. This person was Tai Shuzheng. Rumor has it that just as Tai Shuzheng was about to ascend to the god realm, another peerless genius appeared in the diabolism. It was this peerless genius that destroyed Tai Shuzheng's hope of ascending to the god realm." The demon god. Yu Qianzhou exclaimed when he heard this. He subconsciously thought of the demon god. Who else could be called the peerless genius of the diabolism other than the demon god? Yu Qianzhou cried out, "Could it be that the demon god killed the ancestor of all demons, Tai Shuzheng?" Wei Chuanqiu touched the jade couch and nodded. That's right, it was the demon god. Then he turned around and slowly sat on the couch. He stared at Yu Qianzhou and said, "In fact, the demon god wasn't called the demon god before he fought with Tai Shuzheng. It was because he defeated Tai Shuzheng that he gained the right to ascend to the god realm. Later on, people called him the demon god. Before that, the demon god's name in the three realms was Yi." The demon god's name was Yi. What a strange name. Yu Qianzhou touched his chin and pondered for a while. He asked suspiciously, since Tai Shuzheng's cultivation level was high enough to ascend to the god realm, and the demon god was able to defeat Tai Shuzheng, it meant that he also had the ability to ascend to the god realm. But why did you say that he defeated Tai Shuzheng to gain the right to ascend to the god realm and become the demon god? This. Wei Chuanqiu twirled his mustache and said in a low voice, "This happened too long ago, so there's no way to verify it. However, there are two legends that point out that the demon god defeated Tai Shuzheng to gain the right to ascend to the god realm." Seeing that Zhou Xian had stopped, Yu Qianzhou anxiously scratched his ear and urged, "Hurry up and finish your story." "Which two legends? Tell me so that I can broaden my horizons." In fact, he was very interested in the demon god. One should know that Yan Zhuixing, whose life or death was unknown, had always been a shadow in his heart. The terrifying demon god was Yan Zhuixing's backer, so he was eager to know everything about the demon god. Wasn't there a saying, "Know yourself and know your enemy and you will emerge victorious"? That was what Yu Qianzhou thought. It was better to be prepared than to know nothing. Many people know about the first theory, but I heard about the second theory from an old senior. I'm afraid there aren't many people who know about it. Wei Chuanqiu twirled his mustache and said slowly, "It's said that ascending to the god realm doesn't just depend on one's cultivation. Of course, if one's cultivation doesn't reach a certain level, it's even more impossible to ascend to the god realm. It's said that the god realm doesn't confer gods easily. Every time the god realm descends, the number of people who can ascend to the god realm is limited." Yu Qianzhou was speechless and said, "You must be joking. There's a limit to the number of people who can ascend to the god realm? Are you saying that there was only one person who could ascend to the god realm, so the demon god and Tai Shuzheng fought?" "That's roughly what it means." Wei Chuanqiu nodded and said, "The first theory is that there was only one person who could ascend to the god realm. As you said, Tai Shuzheng and Yi fought over this person. In the end, Tai Shuzheng was defeated and died. The second theory is that there were actually two people who could ascend to the god realm." "Two people? Then why did they fight?" Yu Qianzhou was shocked and suddenly thought of Bai Chongqun. It seemed that the demon god was also a belligerent. Maybe the demon god was also like Bai Chongqun, who had nothing better to do and challenged experts everywhere. In the end he killed Tai Shuzheng. Wei Chuanqiu shook his head and said with a smile, "This legend is more interesting, but I don't think it's very credible. It said that there were indeed 2 people who could ascend to the god realm. However, other than Tai Shuzheng and Yi, there was also a peerless expert called Ming. The 3 of them were called Jing, Yi, and Ming. 3 peerless experts appeared at once, so naturally 2 people were not enough. The reason why this legend is interesting is because of the person called Ming. It said that Ming was a woman, and both Zheng and Yi fell in love with this woman. The 3 of them were actually friends. The ancestor of all demons and the demon god fell in love with a woman called Ming at the same time." Yu Qianchou murmured and raised his eyebrows. Could it be that because Zheng and Yi fell in love with Ming, the 2 men gave one of the 2 people who could ascend to the god realm to Ming? In the end there was only one person left, so the 2 men fought for that person, and in the end Zheng was killed by Yi? That's right. The second theory is the same as what you guessed. That's the general meaning. Wei Chuanqiu laughed wretchedly. That's a little too melodramatic, Yu Qianchou said. He felt that it was somewhat impossible. In his impression, such experts should be like Bai Chongqun, who abandoned everything to pursue the peak of cultivation. It seemed that they should not be restrained by love. After a short moment of silence in the Jade Palace, Yu Qianchou suddenly exclaimed. He raised his eyebrows and seemed to have thought of something. After a while he looked around and asked, "Bat King Wei, did you just say that this is the cultivation place of the ancestor of all demons Tai Shuzheng?" Wei Chuanqiu was stunned. "That's right. That's what I said. This is indeed the cultivation place of the ancestor of all demons Tai Shuzheng. Is there a problem?" Yu Qianchou rubbed his chin and said with a smile, "Although this palace is luxurious, it's unusually simple. How did you know that this is the cultivation place of Tai Shuzheng? Could it be that you found some evidence here? Why don't you take it out and let me have a look?" Wei Chuanqiu's expression changed slightly, but it quickly turned into disdain. "Don't you know what experience is? With my experience it's not difficult for me to determine the origin of this jade palace." Yu Qianchou nodded and gave a long, "Oh." He still had a smile on his face as he asked, "I seem to have heard someone say something about the 10,000 Demons Heart Sutra, because of the pain. I wonder if this 10,000 Demons Heart Sutra is related to the original owner of this place, the ancestor of all demons. What do you think, Bat King Wei?" Chapter 853. Wei Chuanqiu's expression did not change as he revealed a look of disdain. He said disdainfully, "You really dare to think. If the 10,000 Fiend Heart Sutra that I cultivated was related to the 10,000 Fiend ancestor, would I have ended up like this?" Although Wei Chuanqiu's words made sense, how could Yu Qianchou be so easily fooled? He had clearly heard Wei Chuanqiu pounding the ground and howling that he shouldn't have gone into closed-door cultivation to cultivate the 10,000 Demons Heart Sutra. This meant that Wei Chuanqiu had not cultivated the 10,000 Demons Heart Sutra before going into closed-door cultivation. Moreover, how could cultivating the Myriad Demon Heart Sutra in the Myriad Demon Ancestors' place be a coincidence? Hee. Bat King Wei's words make sense. Yu Qianchou nodded solemnly and sighed. "With your fame in the immortal world, I'm sure your Myriad Fiend Heart Sutra has intimidated many people. If there's a chance, I'll have to ask about it so that I can admire the former glory of the Myriad Fiend Heart Sutra." Hearing this, Wei Chuanqiu could no longer pretend, and his expression changed greatly. Others may not know, but he knew very well that the Myriad Demon Heart Sutra was indeed a treasure left behind by Tai Shuzheng, and he obtained it by chance. That was why he had been in seclusion for 10,000 years. It was only because the Myriad Demon's Heart Sutra was suitable for demons to cultivate, and he himself was a descendant of primordial beasts. Now he was even ranked among the ranks of immortal beast. Although he was closely related to demons, there was still a huge difference between him and demons. After 10,000 years he finally found a way to achieve the same goal through different means and began to condense a Yaodan. He saw that the day he would be able to cultivate the Myriad Demon Heart Sutra was not far away. Who would have thought that he would run into Yu Qianchou the jinx at this time? Yu Qianchou actually snatched away the inner core that he had painstakingly refined. The meaning of Yu Qianchou's words was very clear. He was clearly threatening him. Once the secret that he possessed the Myriad Demon Heart Sutra was revealed, most people might not know what the Myriad Demon Heart Sutra was, but some of the old fellows in the immortal world would definitely have heard of it, especially Immortal Emperor Jin Tai. One must know that the cultivation method of the ancestor of all demons Tai Zheng was definitely a peerless cultivation method. Based on Immortal Emperor Jin Tai's character, he would definitely not tolerate the appearance of someone who challenged his authority. Once the secret of the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra was leaked, Immortal Emperor Jin Tai would definitely not let him off. At that time it would be the day of his death. At this moment, Wei Chuanqiu's pupils constricted, and a strong killing intent brewed in his heart. However, on second thought, his inner core was controlled by Yu Qianqiu. He had tried before, and even if he killed Yu Qianqiu, he would not be able to find his inner core. The consequences of losing his inner core were very serious. If it was really as Yu Qianqiu had said, if something happened to him, someone would immediately destroy his inner core. Then he would completely degenerate into a ferocious beast with no intelligence. He could not afford to take this risk. Yu Qianqiu, what do you want? Wei Chuanqiu stood solemnly, and with a gloomy expression he gritted his teeth and said, I have agreed to serve you for 100 years. It is already very difficult. Don't be greedy and go too far. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and smiled. He slowly walked towards the high platform and sat on the jade couch. He touched the jade couch under his buttocks and said, Looks like I guessed correctly, the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra is indeed related to the ancestor of all demons Tai Zheng. Wei Chuanqiu tilted his head and looked at him, his small eyes flashing with a gloomy light. So what? Do you want the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra? That is impossible. Let me tell you, I can give up anything, but the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra belongs to me alone. This sutra contains my lifelong dream. Even if I die, I will not give it to anyone else. You better give up on this idea. Besides, even if I give you the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra, it is useless to you. Humans cannot cultivate the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra. When Yu Qianqiu heard this, he fell into silence. It was just as Wei Chuanqiu said, he indeed wanted the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra. The cultivation technique of an expert who had the qualifications to become a god was extremely attractive to him. However, Wei Chuanqiu's attitude was so resolute, as if he was prepared to die rather than submit. Using threats would definitely not work. Moreover, if it was really as Wei Chuanqiu said, that he was unable to cultivate the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra, even if he put in all his effort to obtain it, the price would not be small. It was very likely that he would lose the assistant Wei Chuanqiu that he desperately needed at this moment. Bat King Wei, you are thinking too much. Yu Qianqiu slowly said, The reason why I am concerned about the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra is not because I want to obtain your 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra. You can rest assured about this. I just want you to do me a favor. Wei Chuanqiu asked suspiciously, What favor? Yu Qianqiu's eyes instantly lit up. He said in a cadence, If there is a chance, I will introduce a disciple to you. Please teach her the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra. As for the speed of teaching, I will leave it to you. I will definitely not force you. However, you must promise me one thing. Before the 100 years are up, you must at least let her have the ability to protect herself when she encounters an expert below the Immortal Emperor stage. This is my only request, and it is also a request that you must promise me. Otherwise, I don't care if you want to live or die. I guarantee that you will not live past today. Bat King Wei, can you promise me this? This. Wei Chuanqiu hesitated with some difficulty. It was difficult for him to make a decision. Seeing his hesitation, Yu Qianqiu's eyes flashed as he continued. Although I don't know why you have not made much progress after cultivating the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra for 10,000 years, I believe that Tai Zheng's 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra is definitely not simple. It should not be difficult to create an ordinary expert. I'm afraid that you have encountered some insurmountable difficulties. Don't worry, if you encounter any external difficulties during the teaching process, you can tell me. Leave everything to me. If I can solve it, I will do my best. If I can't, I will think of a way to solve it. You only need to sincerely teach her the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra. Leave all the troubles to me. Wei Chuanqiu twirled his huge sleeves, twirled his mustache, looked at Yu Qianqiu from head to toe and said, There are indeed some headache-inducing troubles in the process of cultivating the 1000 Demon Heart Sutra. With your cultivation base, are you sure you can solve them? Sitting cross-legged on the jade couch, Yu Qianqiu said coolly, I believe the speed of teaching and the speed of solving problems are directly proportional. If it is because I am unable to solve the problems brought about by the external objects that affect your teaching, then I can only blame myself. You can't be blamed. You do not need to worry. Hearing this, Wei Chuanqiu began to ponder. He realized that Yu Qianzhou's request was actually not excessive. The 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra was broad and profound. If he taught her a portion, it would not affect him much. After all, Yu Qianzhou did not ask him to teach her everything he knew. He only needed her to reach a certain level within 100 years. Most importantly, although this fellow's cultivation was not high, his methods were unfathomable. Who knows, he might really be able to solve some of the troubles in the process of cultivating the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra. This would also be beneficial to him. After thinking it over, Wei Chuanqiu said, I can promise you. However, what if you do not return my inner core after this, or leak out the secret that I possess the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra? You have a handle on me, but I have no way to deal with you. Words have no proof. How do you expect me to believe you? That's easy. I'll just give you a handle on me to put you at ease. As soon as Yu Qianzhou finished speaking, he stood up in a flash. His eyes that were staring at Wei Chuanqiu suddenly lit up with two purple flames. At this moment, a purple flame suddenly burst out from Yu Qianzhou's body. A majestic and powerful energy violently burst out. The terrifying temperature that could incinerate everything was emitted. The raging purple flames shook people's hearts. The purple brilliance was magnificent and magnificent. Yu Qianzhou quietly stood on the jade couch. His body was surrounded by the purple flames. He was like an evil god as he coldly stared at Wei Chuanqiu. He carefully controlled the majestic power of the purple flames. Otherwise, the Jade Palace would instantly become an underground ruin. However, he could not avoid letting Wei Chuanqiu have a taste of it. Otherwise, how could he convince Wei Chuanqiu? Wei Chuanqiu was immediately startled by the high temperature. At first, he was able to use his profound cultivation to barely block it. However, when the terrifying temperature truly pressed down on him, he immediately let out an "ah" and dodged far away. Dumbfounded, he pointed at Yu Qianzhou and stammered, This is, could this be the purple flames? When Yu Qianzhou was controlling his inner core, he did not recognize what it was. However, at this moment when the terrifying purple flames appeared, he immediately recognized it. To Wei Chuanqiu's knowledge, besides the purple flames, there was nothing else that could imitate such a terrifying purple flame. The dazzling purple light that was refracted by the entire Jade Palace gradually dimmed. The raging purple flames were slowly withdrawn into Yu Qianzhou's body. Yu Qianzhou stood on the couch with his hands clasped behind his back. He indifferently said, Bat King Wei's eyesight is indeed not ordinary. To actually be able to recognize it. That's right, it is the purple flames. After receiving confirmation, Wei Chuanqiu's small eyes suddenly widened. He exclaimed from a distance away from Yu Qianzhou, How is this possible? How could you possibly hide the purple flames in your body? Hehe. Bat King doesn't need to worry about this. Yu Qianzhou teleported in front of Wei Chuanqiu. Facing him, he smiled and asked, Apart from me, the only one who knows the secret of the purple flames in my body is you. Once this news gets out, I'm sure Immortal Emperor Jin Tai won't let me off. With such a big weakness given to Bat King, I'm sure Bat King now feels safe. I wonder if Bat King still has any doubts? Wei Chuanqiu let out a breath of cold air. He slowly shook his head and said, Unbelievable, truly unbelievable. I've only heard of people using magical treasures to contain purple flames, but I've never heard of anyone storing purple flames in their body. As expected, there is always someone better out there. I've finally seen it. Falling into your hands today is not an injustice. Since you're so sincere, what else do I have to say? Good. I promise you. Hehe. Bat King is straightforward. This is the attitude that a cooperation should have. Yu Qianzhou laughed happily. Wei Chuanqiu immediately rolled his eyes. Is this considered a cooperation? You're clearly blackmailing me into helping you. The corner of his mouth twitched. Suddenly he curiously asked, Who is the disciple you want to introduce to me? Is it worth it for you to divulge such an important secret that endangers your own safety? Chapter 854. Yu Qianzhou's eyes, which had been fostered by scheming all day long, showed a hint of gentleness and a faint smile appeared on his face. Shaking his head, he said, Only by finding someone worth sacrificing for can one live a meaningful life. As for who it is, you will naturally know when you meet them. Wei Chuanqiu's sly eyebrows twitched as he winked and said, I'm guessing it must be a woman. Looking at his appearance, it seemed he had completely forgotten about the miserable state he had been in when he was beaten. But then again, after getting hold of Yu Qianchou's weakness, his tightened heart finally relaxed. What he did not know was that this was the mindset of a despicable person like Yu Qianchou. It seemed easy, but in reality it was very difficult. Most people would not dare to take a risk that could completely endanger their lives. But Yu Qianchou, who loved to take advantage of others, knew that there was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. The more one wanted to obtain, the more the price to pay would always be proportional. One could not stubbornly cling to one's own benefits and not let others take advantage of them. Otherwise, one would die a miserable death sooner or later. This was the saying, where there is gain there is loss. Sometimes taking the initiative to give up a little would often result in more. Take a step back and you will see the world. Yu Qianchou smiled faintly and did not answer whether he was a man or a woman. Turning to a serious face, he said, "Bat King Wei, the 100-year period is starting to take effect. You have been cooped up here for 10,000 years, now it is time to come out with me to get some fresh air." Wei Chuanqiu's expression twitched as he looked around the huge jade palace. Smiling bitterly, he said, "You spent so much effort to get me out, but what do you want me to help you with? It can't be that I will lose my life before the 100-year period ends, right?" Yu Qianchou looked at him and said with a smile, "Could it be that the green-winged Bat King I fancy is so useless? Don't look at me like that, I am not trying to provoke you. Perhaps one day you will find that leaving this place with me is the best choice. I hope your words are auspicious." Wei Chuanqiu cupped his hands at him in a bad mood. Come with me. If you continue to be so long-winded, I'll release a purple flame and turn this place into a proper bat nest." After saying that, Yu Qianchou took the lead and dashed out of the cave. He threw a silver ball into the winding passageway and rushed out of the cave to wait. Not long after, a green light flashed and Wei Chuanqiu appeared at the entrance of the cave. She turned around and looked at the entrance with a frown. "I have to find something to block the entrance of the cave so that no one can destroy the jade palace inside." "That's easy. I'll help you." Yu Qianchou floated in front of him and stretched out his 5 claws at the entrance of the cave. The rocks at the entrance of the cave began to change silently and slowly fuse together. In the blink of an eye, the entrance of the cave disappeared. The stone wall that seemed to have been cut by knives and axes was no different from the weathered stone walls around it. Who would have thought that there would be a cave behind this stone wall? Wei Chuanqiu was dumbfounded. He had seen people who could control earth, but he didn't think that there would be someone who could control stone and change it at will. He looked at Yu Qianchou speechlessly. He found that this guy was really unfathomable. How could a soul formation stage cultivator have so many magical methods? Could it be that after staying in the cave for 10,000 years he had lost touch with the outside world? Wei Chuanqiu shook his head and took out a jade talisman. He injected something into it and crushed it. A faint light quickly disappeared into the air. Yu Qianchou was no longer a rookie in the celestial realm. He knew that this was the celestial realm's communication method. However, he couldn't use such a high-level communication method before reaching the celestial realm. He coughed and asked, "Who are you communicating with? Tell Xiao Changquan not to disturb me without my permission." Wei Chuanqiu threw the jade talisman in his hand. Yu Qianchou raised his eyebrows and sneered, "Hee. I'm going to settle the score with him." "Settle the score with him?" Wei Chuanqiu said unhappily. "He is my man after all. Are you not going to give me face? What's more, I didn't want to be disturbed, so I told him that he wouldn't take the initiative to cause trouble. You must have done something first. Otherwise he wouldn't have done it." Yu Qianchou was dazed. He immediately remembered that he burned the bat cave out of curiosity. He waved his hand and said, "For your sake I'll let this matter go. I won't pursue it anymore." Yu Qianchou became spirited. He rubbed his hands and said excitedly, "To hallucinatory Immortal City first." Wei Chuanqiu said, "Cold wind howled in the abyss." The cold wind howled incessantly in the innumerable gully abyss. The two of them directly soared into the sky from the abyss one after the other, flying away quickly. Almost in the blink of an eye, Yu Qianchou was dumbfounded. He cursed in his heart and desperately chased after it. Wei Chuanqiu, who forgot about Yu Qianchou, also reacted. He looked back and found that Yu Qianchou was nowhere to be found. He immediately recalled that Yu Qianchou's cultivation was only at the soul formation stage. Furthermore, he was born with the ability to fly. His flying speed was one of the best in the immortal world. How could Yu Qianchou catch up to him? He stopped in the air and waited for a while before he saw Yu Qianqiu chasing after him. As he flew, he shouted, "Bat King Wei, don't just care about yourself." Wei Chuanqiu waited for him to catch up and slowly flew with him. After flying for a while, Wei Chuanqiu asked impatiently, "With your speed, it will be a month later when we reach hallucinatory Immortal City, right? That long?" Yu Qianqiu was shocked. He said, "How about you use a flying shuttle to carry me?" Wei Chuanqiu said, "Give me the flying shuttle." Yu Qianqiu shook his head, "I don't have that." Wei Chuanqiu said in disdain, "You don't have it. Who in the immortal realm has seen me use a flying shuttle? Why don't you show your true form and carry me?" Yu Qianqiu asked weakly. As he expected, Wei Chuanqiu roared, "You think I'm your immortal beast mount?" He turned around and was about to leave. "Wait, I almost forgot." Yu Qianqiu grabbed him and the two of them stopped in the air. Yu Qianqiu took out a black thing with two sharp ends and a round middle from his storage bag. Wei Chuanqiu looked at him suspiciously and threw it out with a spell. In the blink of an eye, a black and cold strange thing appeared in the air. "What is this?" Wei Chuanqiu looked at the smooth and streamlined strange thing that looked like a round shuttle. Yu Qianqiu looked at the words, Utopia 001, on the flying shuttle and chuckled. "You'll know later." He performed a spell and the flying shuttle's belly flipped, revealing the entrance. After the two of them entered, Wei Chuanqiu kept shaking his head. He looked at the empty space and asked, "Is this a flying treasure?" "It's actually made of nether iron." He touched everything inside. Yu Qianqiu closed the cabin door and the cabin instantly became dark. Wei Chuanqiu chuckled and said, "Are you thinking of flying blindfolded?" Just as he finished speaking, there was a buzzing sound from a spring. His eyes lit up and 8 transparent crystal windows appeared. He could see everything outside clearly. Wei Chuanqiu waved his extraordinarily large sleeves and walked forward curiously. Yu Qianqiu sat on the only chair at the top, and the entire flying shuttle rapidly accelerated forward. Wei Chuanqiu's eyes immediately lit up. He leaned against the back of the chair and sized up the transparent crystal windows, his eyes filled with curiosity. After looking for a while, he coughed and said, "There's only one chair here. Aren't you embarrassed to let me stand alone?" Yu Qianqiu found it funny, but he deliberately looked forward and said, "This seat is for the person driving the flying shuttle. Zai. With your cultivation level, your speed is too slow. Move aside, let me do it." Wei Chuanqiu vaguely mentioned what he wanted to do. Yu Qianqiu didn't argue with him and gave the seat to him. With Wei Chuanqiu's cultivation level, the flying shuttle was indeed faster than him. Wei Chuanqiu sat on it and after asking how to pilot it, he directly drove it like crazy. The speed was extremely fast. The corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth curled up into a smile. He could go to the back cabin to sleep now. When he turned around and walked to the back cabin, he felt that his center of gravity was a little unstable. It was obvious that the flying speed was getting faster and faster. Just as he walked to the back cabin door, he suddenly heard a strange creaking sound. He couldn't help but turn around and shouted, "Stop." There were already many cracks on the 8 transparent crystal windows. Unfortunately, he shouted a little too late. Bang! The crystal windows all shattered and a strong gust of wind rushed in. The flying shuttle immediately stopped. Wei Chuanqiu sat on the chair, dumbfounded. He said in surprise, "Why is it so weak?" Yu Qianqiu was speechless. This thing was made by the Jing family, one of the 4 great clans in the human world. The Jing family probably didn't expect that one day, it would be controlled by an immortal emperor. At such a high speed, it was normal that the crystal windows couldn't withstand the pressure and broke. The two of them quietly flew out of the broken window. Yu Qianqiu used a spell to keep the flying shuttle. He held it in his hand and said bitterly, "There's only one of this in the entire celestial realm. I borrowed it from someone to play with. Now it's destroyed by your hands. How am I going to explain this to others?" Wei Chuanqiu believed him. There probably wasn't another such strange thing in the celestial realm. He smiled awkwardly and said, "This thing can't be looked at or not. It's fine if it's destroyed. Let's continue on our way." Yu Qianqiu wasn't someone to be trifled with. Now that he had found an excuse, he wouldn't give up so easily. He immediately said expressionlessly, "I think you should just show your true form and carry me." Wei Chuanqiu couldn't say anything about an immortal beast or a mount anymore. It was his fault for destroying someone else's precious item. In the end he gritted his teeth and said, "This is the only time. There won't be a next time." The green fog exploded and a huge green bat with a wingspan of 5 to 6 meters appeared. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. He didn't need Wei Chuanqiu to tell him to stand on the bat. The ferocious-looking bat carried him and disappeared into the distance. Chapter 855. The vast land was filled with undulating mountains and valleys, and the winding rivers surged endlessly. Above the clear blue sky, a ray of green light directly streaked across like a shuttle. Yu Qianqiu stood on the back of the giant bat with his hands clasped behind his back, silently admiring the magnificent mountains and rivers below. His heart was filled with emotions. It was not because of the beauty of the mountains and rivers, but because he had never thought that one day he would be able to control an immortal beast with the cultivation of an immortal emperor. He reckoned that those who could control an immortal beast of this level were not ordinary people. On the other hand, Wei Chuanqiu, who had revealed its true form and was flapping its wings, flew in silence, as if it was suppressing a breath of resentment in its heart. No matter how Yu Qianqiu tried to strike up a conversation, it did not reply, and from the giant bat's ferocious face, he could not see its expression. As the 2-meter-long wings flapped, a faint green splendor sprayed out like a rainbow. As the wings flapped, the edges of the wings undulated with a brilliant green arc of light. It was extremely beautiful. Yu Qianqiu originally thought that he would have to withstand a huge wind pressure standing on top of it. After all, the flying speed was too fast. However, to his surprise, as soon as this giant bat flew, its body immediately surged out a very beautiful arc-shaped green light shield, breaking through the air and flying rapidly. The green light was like a thin nebula, rising from the head of the giant bat, sliding down to its tail, forming a green light tail. It was truly indescribably beautiful. Yu Qianqiu stood on Wei Chuanqiu's back as if he was in a dream. He did not feel the wind pressure brought by the high-speed flying at all. It was a very magical feeling. Every time the green wings slowly flapped, the beautiful scenery of the mountains and rivers below would quickly fade away. It could be seen how fast Wei Chuanqiu's flying speed was. One man, one bat. After a silent stalemate for a whole day, Yu Qianqiu had already sat down with his legs crossed. He took out a piece of roasted meat from God knows where, and it was the kind that was filled with hot steam, the kind that was overflowing with fragrance. He took a bite and chewed twice. The other hand was pouring fine wine into his mouth. In both of Yu Qianqiu's lives, this was the first time he had done something so pleasurable. Not only was it like falling into a dream, there was also the constantly changing scenery below. Plus he was high up in the sky, the rosy clouds were passing by, and there was fine wine and delicious food. The word, pleasurable, could not describe it. The giant bat flapped its wings and looked back from time to time, its eyes filled with uncontrollable anger. Yu Qianqiu burped as he shook the roasted meat in his hand. With a concerned look on his face he asked, "Bat King Wei, do you want to stop and eat something?" The bat suddenly turned around and ignored him. This was the first time in his life that he had become someone else's mount. One could imagine the grievance in his heart. Suddenly he felt a cold dripping sensation on his back. When he turned around to look, he immediately flew into a rage. He saw Yu Qianqiu raising the wine pot and gulping it down. The clear wine flowed out from the corner of his mouth and wet his back. He immediately roared, "Yu Qianqiu, who do you think I am? Don't be too presumptuous." "I'm sorry, I really didn't mean to." Yu Qianqiu apologized again and again. He spread his fingers and tried the absorbing star's great art. A cloud of white mist rose and was sucked into his palm. The wet area was instantly dried up. The giant bat's pupils shrank when it saw the cloud of white mist entering his palm. It snorted coldly and turned around. A smile hung on Yu Qianqiu's face. He finally forced this guy to speak. Seizing the chance, he coughed and asked, "Bat King Wei, how much longer do we need to reach the hallucinatory immortal city?" Wei Chuanqiu's anger had yet to dissipate, so he ignored him and flew straight ahead. Suddenly he saw a tall mountain in the distance. There were perilous peaks everywhere, clouds swirled around them, and white cranes danced among the towering ancient pines. There was a clear spring in the mountain and a waterfall splashed like the Milky Way. The green mountains and clear waters were lush and green. Yu Qianqiu threw away the food in his hand and jumped to his feet. His eyes shone as he clicked his tongue and said, "What a paradise! Bat King Wei, let's go take a look." The giant bat's sharp eyes shrank. It flapped its wings and changed the direction of its flight. Wanted to go around the paradise that Yu Qianqiu mentioned. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Bat King Wei, this isn't the way to the hallucinatory immortal city, right? Shut up, the giant bat said in human voice. I'm more familiar with the way to go than you are. Not long after the two left the mountain, a white light shot out from the perilous peak and chased after them. The giant bat turned around to take a look. It flapped its wings even faster and flew away at an unbelievable speed. However, the white light's speed was not any slower than Wei Qianqiu's. It gradually caught up to them. Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned. He felt something was wrong. He frowned and said, Bat King Wei, is that your enemy? Shut up. It's all because of you. I've lost so much face today. Wei Qianqiu's tone was a little impatient. Just as he finished speaking, the white light increased its speed again. It quickly caught up to them and flew side by side with Wei Qianqiu. Within the white light was a white-robed man. His hair was as white as snow and was simply tied behind his head. He had a pair of white sword-like eyebrows and his eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. His entire person had an extraordinary aura, and the first impression he gave off was very intimidating. Yu Qianqiu immediately became vigilant. A person who could fly as fast as Bat King Wei and make Bat King Wei feel apprehensive must have a high cultivation. However, the strange thing was that Bat King Wei and that person didn't even look at each other. They just flew faster and faster. It was so fast that Yu Qianqiu's eyes were a little dazzled. He couldn't see the scenery in the sky and on the ground clearly. Everything flashed by in a flash. The stalemate didn't last long. The white-clothed man was already ahead of Bat King Wei. The latter tried his best to catch up, but he couldn't. The former was ahead of Bat King Wei for half a day. Wei Qianqiu seemed to know he couldn't catch up, so he simply slowed down and adjusted his flying direction. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his chin as he observed the streak of white light that was growing further and further away. He discovered that the two did not seem to be enemies. However, from how the two of them were competing with each other, it was clear that the two of them wanted to compete with each other in terms of speed. Just as he was about to ask Wei Qianqiu who the other person was, he suddenly saw the white light change direction and chase after them again. Not long after, the white-clothed man was flying side by side with Wei Qianqiu again. Yu Qianqiu was staring at the other person. At this time, the white-clothed man also slowly turned his cold face over. He stared at Yu Qianqiu with a gaze as cold as ice. When he discovered that he couldn't see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation, a trace of surprise appeared in his cold eyes. Before, I thought I was mistaken. I didn't think it really was you, a stinky bat who's been hiding somewhere for tens of thousands of years. The white-clothed man's gaze fell on Wei Qianqiu. With a face full of disdain, he coldly snorted and said, I didn't think that the grand green-winged Bat King, who was quite a character 10,000 years ago, would become someone else's immortal beast mount. No wonder you're too ashamed to face others and have to avoid me by circling around White Cloud Mountain. Bullshit. Wei Qianqiu, who had been silent all this time, couldn't help but curse. He turned to the white-clothed man and shouted, Yunping, who's someone else's immortal beast mount? Speak clearly for this, daddy. The white-clothed man called Yunping coldly glanced at Yu Qianqiu. His meaning was self-evident. He was referring to Yu Qianqiu as Wei Qianqiu's immortal beast mount. Wei Qianqiu straightened his neck and roared, What can you see with those bird eyes of yours? His cultivation is only at the soul formation final stage. Use your brain and think about it. With his cultivation, how could I lower myself to become his immortal beast mount? I'm just giving him a ride because I broke his flying treasure. You're looking down on people with bird eyes. Yunpeng was startled. He carefully examined Yu Qianqiu again. His eyes were filled with confusion. Clearly, he was still confused that he couldn't see through his opponent's cultivation. However, he also knew that since Wei Qianqiu could say something like this, he definitely wasn't his mount. After all, no immortal beast mount would say something like that about their master. Yunpeng's gaze returned to Wei Qianqiu. He shook his head coldly and said, I can't believe that after 10,000 years, your cultivation still hasn't improved. In terms of speed, you're no longer my match. After so many years, we've finally decided who's better. Wei Qianqiu, do you admit defeat? Admit your bird feather. Wei Qianqiu sneered, I can't be bothered to argue with you. You're still so stupid and shameless. You clearly saw that I was carrying a person on my back, yet you still shamelessly came to compete with me in speed. Only you could do this. Yu Qianqiu looked at Yunpeng suspiciously. Hearing Wei Chuanqiu call him bird, he deeply doubted Yunping's identity as a human. Less nonsense. Do you admit defeat or not? Yunping said indifferently, if you don't, you can put him down. We'll have another fair and square competition to see who's better. Wei Chuanqiu was speechless. He knew his own situation very well. For the past 10,000 years he didn't cultivate at all. He only focused on researching the Myriad Demon Heart Sutra. In addition, his condensed inner core was burned twice by Yu Qianqiu with his purple fire. In reality, his cultivation was no longer the same as it was 10,000 years ago. If he really wanted to compete, he definitely wouldn't be Yunping's match. Even so, the large bat's eyes darted around as if he thought of something. He then said with disdain, Yunping, you really didn't live these 10,000 years in vain. As expected, you've become more and more cunning. I've already flown for a long time. Adding on the fact that I was carrying a person to compete with you, I've used up too much energy. Even if I put him down and compete with you now, do you think it can be considered a fair and square competition? Even if you want to take advantage of me, you shouldn't do it like this. Yunping's white eyebrows furrowed. He muttered, then why don't you come to my Baiyun mountain to rest first? When you've recovered, we'll have another fair and square competition. At that time I'll make you accept your defeat. Wei Bat King continued to fly forward. He sneered and replied, I don't have your free time. I promised to send him to hallucinatory Immortal City. Let's talk about the competition when there's a chance. Yunping's cold face was full of disdain. He said coldly, don't tell me you know you can't do it, so you're looking for an excuse? Wei Bat King suddenly turned around and said word by word, if you really want to compete, why don't you reveal your true form? Just like how I carried him to compete with you. Do you dare to carry him and compete with me?